So we are going to invite up here Quinn McElvain from the University of Arizona. And Quinn is going to be presenting on accelerating riparian reestablishment for key bird species in the Santa Cruz River. Quinn, the floor is yours. Come on up.
Hey everyone, I'm super excited to be here. This is my first research days ever, and I wasn't able to make it yesterday either. I traveled from Phoenix this morning, so this is my first taste. Super excited. Luke encouraged me to come present today, and also I was wondering if Mackenzie Waller is here. I saw her name tag, but I don't see her, but she was my professor for this project that I'm going to be presenting. So yeah, let's just dive into it. My project is on accelerating bird species reestablishment in the Santa Cruz River and establishing what I am going to describe as a vertically complete riparian ecosystem. So we did have a site on the west side of the I-10. If you take the I-10 north and you look over to your left, it's right on Silverbell and Sunset. You may have noticed a very large excavation. It's a gravel pit. They've been mining gravel out of that place for a long time, but it was just acquired by Pima County recently. So our project was all about different things that can be done here in this zone. And a lot of people in my class, they went beyond the gravel pit, kind of like I did. So the Santa Cruz River is part of it. And you can see, I learned something new about Tucson that I did not know until this year, but Tucson is one of the premier birding hotspots in the United States, which is pretty cool. And I did not know this. And this is, it kind of makes sense. I mean, Tucson is a kind of juncture point of a lot of desert habitats that are very different from one another. And interestingly, we also lie on the Pacific Flyway. And the Pacific Flyway is one of the most major migration routes for migrating bird species in North America. And the Santa Cruz River plays a very critical role in that migration route. So it's a very popular stopover point for bird species. And this little timeline here on the left, this is, you can kind of see how the condition of the Santa Cruz River has changed over the last couple centuries. And we have unfortunately dealt with the loss of a lot of plant species. So at one point, the Santa Cruz River had its perennial flows. It supported cottonwoods, much of which no longer even exist now, as well as mesquite bosks. So there on the top, you can kind of see how there was a gradual transition into that riparian environment. And today, that definitely does not exist. We have these steep walls on the riverbanks. There's not a riparian transition at all. There's a lot of invasives today. And those cottonwood bosks, mesquite bosks, they don't even exist. And there's a lot of, there is a lot of kind of case studies of bird watching zones in this area, especially along the Santa Cruz River. So many of you have probably been to a few of them. We have Danny Lopez Park, Sweetwater Reserve, El Rio Preserve as well. So those are all on the Santa Cruz River. And this data here, this is just public data. People can submit bird sightings. So you can see that there's like a concentration here, which is where downtown is. And obviously a lot of people, a lot of reports. But the other trend you'll notice is that there is definitely a concentration up the Santa Cruz River. But there are fragmented parts, such as this little red zone here, which is exactly where we're dealing with. So for this project, we were all encouraged to choose a key species that we could monitor that is prevalent in the area. So my initial selection was Lucy's warbler, which is a pretty cool bird. It's one of only two nesting or cavity nesting warblers. It doesn't make its own cavities to nest in. It relies on cavities that were pre-made by other species or just naturally like under bark or splitting tree trunks. And that was the bird that kind of guided a lot of this research. And I ended up selecting two other bird species strategically to measure kind of different parts of riparian reestablishment success. So that led me to choose the yellow-billed cuckoo bird. And the reason I selected that one is because it's a canopy dweller. So instead of that kind of middle story that the Lucy's warbler kind of represents, this would represent like mature canopies. And then the third one was Abird's towhee. So that's a ground foraging bird, kind of represents that other end of the scale. It relies on a lot of seeds on the ground, dense thickets of shrubs, and wet kind of ground. So as I was kind of showing in that timeline from the last slide, this is just a look at how the gradual transition into the riparian environment could and should look, ideally. So if you have these kind of terraced walls of the riverbank, you have more of an opportunity to bring back these key species and possibly get the cottonwoods back thriving. So due to groundwater pumping in the last couple decades, especially, the water table has dropped so low in the Santa Cruz River that these trees like cottonwood, they can't reach the water, which has led to a significant die-off. And that's why we have that sharp transition that we have today. So I'm kind of proposing this project as an opportunity for recreational observation, so people can kind of use this as a birding hotspot, kind of like the other parks that are along the river. So this would go in part too with just some more natural restoration efforts. So there's a lot of off-sheet water there that just kind of collects on that road on Silverbell and Sunset. So kind of redirecting some of that water into some basins, and you can dredge the bottom of the river basin as well. So I mean, I'm sure some of you guys have seen after like extreme weather events, after a big storm, a lot of trash collects in the river basin. A lot of that is just due to how thick the invasive species is. So we have a lot of giant reed, tamarisk, Bermuda grass, things that kind of just capture that trash and don't allow for a strong flow. So kind of dredging some of that out, reestablishing these terraced plantings on the sides. And then the third thing that I wanted to implement was kind of an artificial way of supporting these three species that I selected. So this project would include something like an observation deck. That's kind of the bird watching aspect of it. I have a little model here of what that would kind of look like. And this is, I'm gonna also introduce, so the Tucson Bird Alliance, they did a great study on different types of bird boxes that they use for Lucy's warbler, and it was great. They did like several different studies on which ones were the most successful. They did it all over Tucson, all over the Santa Cruz River basin, and decided that this was like the most effective one. So you can find a great little PDF online that shows you how to make this. Super easy. You can put it up in your backyard. So I copied that and then built I'm gonna set this down. Built a box for it. So this would be like a modular box that it could go in that would keep it kind of its own system. And this could slide into, like, say this is the wall of the observation deck, like a drawer, like pull it out. So this is really great for cleaning it after use. When it's not being used, you can monitor it. There's a lot of research that you'd be able to do with these little modular systems that you could repair, clean out, restore, and they would be, use the microphone now? Gotcha. You'd be able to integrate this into the walls of the observation deck and still have that like 10 feet of separation for the humans. So you're not going to really disturb that natural process that the birds have in their nests. And then, so that would be like for the Lucy's warbler, obviously they're the cavity nester. The other two things would be like these leaf litter basins here. So this is kind of just like an indented little, think of it like as a puddle. And these can collect leaf litter. They can hold and retain water and kind of create that perfect environment for Abert's towhee. And then the third and final species that I used, the yellow-billed cuckoo bird, which is that canopy nester. I'm proposing these cornet cuts. So a cornet cut is a series of chainsaw cuts. It's totally not natural, but what it does is it emulates a natural branch fracture. And this is what the cuckoo birds usually build their nests in. And you can also bring those from offsite, which I think is cool about it. Like if you have some dead trees, you can almost use it as an artificial like art element. You make these cuts, bring them from offsite and set them up on site. So this is just another look of the warbler nest box and how that looks. Like I said, you guys should definitely look into the Tucson Bird Alliance and their PDF on how to build these. It's very cheap and you can do it out of one little plank. And the leaf litter basins and the cornet cut. So essentially what we're doing here is if you can see all three of these birds coming back and thriving in this area, you can kind of infer that you are making progress in restoration efforts. because for these three to exist, you need these mature canopies, you need these dense thickets, you need ample nesting sites. So if all three are thriving, you are, in theory, repairing the riparian environment, and you would be able to monitor these in more fragmented zones of the Santa Cruz River. So you could do this in somewhere where it's already kind of thriving, or you could do this in a more fragmented, more damaged, degraded part of the Santa Cruz River, and kind of compare how that is truly making a difference. So that's all I have time for today, but this has been super cool to share with you guys, and I'm looking forward to what else is out there. I appreciate it. Thank you, guys.
Quinn, nice job. All right, we do have time for questions. So if anybody has any questions for Quinn, let's hear them. You know what? Now that you've our post presentation, can you sort of talk through again, like leaning into the mic, how the box kit works?
Yes. I was really thinking that the Tucson Bird Alliance has done just a lot of like hanging these in trees. Totally nothing wrong with that. That's awesome as well. But I was thinking of like how you could have many of them in kind of one area. So being able to also turn it into an opportunity for human interaction where people can observe kind of the process, the nesting process, and really experience and get to know the local bird species. So having something like this that is modular and being able to just slip this into, yeah. So yeah, Luke's holding the drawer that can just pull in and out of the wall for easy removal, clean it, rebuild these if they break. And yeah, exactly. Just slides flush with the surface. And that's what, yeah. So on this box, all these little Lego bit looking pieces on it, that would be like an individual nest box. So you could have a bunch of them on one deck, still have that kind of separation.
Very cool. Yeah. And the model, how about the models for the shelf piece? Are they on the, is that your own, or are they on the TBA side?
Like creating, oh, this?
Yeah.
This was just like my creation here, but TBA site should make one of these. How to make this?
Right on. All right. Any further questions? Yeah, we on Zoom, and then we got Ernest.
Yeah.
Here you go, Zoom.
All right, so we have two questions. So the first question from Leah, sorry if I pronounced that wrong. Is the box kit something good to set up in one's backyard? So is it like?
Yes, it definitely is, and TBA recommends that, and you certainly should. But the only thing that you would have to consider is definitely just like the deterioration of like the wood material that you choose. If you want to choose something that is treated or that's going to actually last in the elements outside, and you also want to pick something that is safe as well. So if it is treated, is it good for the environment? But absolutely.
Okay, thank you. We have another question from Beryl. How can we get into contact with you? They are interested in doing collaborative work with their neighborhood with you.
That sounds super cool. The best thing I could probably give you right now is my email or my LinkedIn. My email is McElvain. It's my last name. I'm not sure if you can find it online, but it's McElvain at Arizona.edu. Or my LinkedIn is Quinn McElvain. You can find me on there and just message me.
Thank you.
Of course. Thank you for the questions.
All right, we got one over here from Ernest, unless you also wanted to know his email address.
Thank you again.
Yeah.
My question for you is the raptor species, are they prevalent now along the water courses?
Like the towhee or another species?
No, raptors like hawks and...
Oh, okay. Yeah, absolutely. And they definitely like those coronet cuts as well. So I feel like the most common place that you see those like hawks and raptors out there is definitely those high peaking kind of snags, those dead snags, which are totally all over the site. And again, too, if you were to bring dead branches from off site, big trunks, I'm sure the raptors would definitely benefit from that as well.
Quinn, great job. Thanks for being here.
Thank you. I appreciate it. That was awesome. Thank you. Thank you.
Wonderful. All right. Is this guy live too? Great. Okay, so now we are going to welcome up Michael Bogan from the University of Arizona, and Michael will be presenting on the population status of native and non-native turtles along the effluent-dependent Santa Cruz River. Michael. Feel free.
Excellent. Thank you, Luke. Thank you, Luke and Claire and everyone from Sonoran Institute for all the amazing organizing they do. And thanks to a nearly full room in person. This is awesome. I'm excited today to talk about some long-term work we've been doing the last several years, looking at turtles in the Santa Cruz River. A couple of our cute little turtles here from down in Tumacácori. Really the star of the show is the only native turtle to the Santa Cruz River Basin, which is the Sonora mud turtle. This is a fairly widespread species across the state of Arizona, so it's not listed as endangered, it's not even threatened yet, but it is something that's disappearing from the edges of its range, especially if you look out west and in the southern parts of its range, it's losing habitat. And so it's a species at least of concern for those of us who study aquatic species. It's a really fun one in the context of Tucson, because scientifically, it was described from a specimen collected in the river in downtown Tucson. So the scientist who described the species was named LeConte. He was back in DC. He had nothing to do with Tucson, but his son was on one of these boundary surveys, and his son ended up collecting the turtle out of the river in downtown Tucson, and that turtle made it back to Washington, D.C., and that's how the species first got described to science. So our native mud turtle is famous in the context of Tucson. We've heard a little bit about what the Santa Cruz River used to look like in Tucson and elsewhere, and how it's very different from what it is today. I think it's interesting that one of the first written descriptions of Tucson in the last 200 years after Kino was actually from a German visitor who describes the river in Tucson as a rapid brook, clear as crystal, full of aquatic plants, fish, and turtles of various kinds. So it's obvious that turtles were a big part of the Santa Cruz River and its ecology, and were really noticeable to anyone who came to visit the river in town. This is an image from 1907 near Congress, so it gives you an idea of kind of what the historic Santa Cruz River looked like at its base flow, which was not all that big. As a few of the other speakers have mentioned, it was much more of a floodplain with braided channels, and so one of the channels would look a lot like this, which is only maybe 6 or 8 feet wide and a couple feet deep. And basically, up until 1913, there were a number of people who came through and looked for fish or looked for reptiles. And every single survey through 1913 found turtles, so they were a prominent part of the aquatic community until the river dried up in Tucson in 1913. And at that point, the perennial flow was gone, but it still had intermittent flow for quite a while afterwards, for another couple decades. And the turtles can survive seasonal drying, so they probably did fine in those initial decades after the perennial flow dried up. But by the 1940s, we basically had a river that had changed to ephemeral, so it only had water after flood events. The groundwater was way too deep. And at that point in time, what the turtles did was just move out of the riverbed and move into irrigation canals. So this is a view from a mountain looking south, and so 29th Street, modern day 29th Street would be that line in the center of the photo. And so these turtles got out of the river when it dried up, moved into the irrigation canals in those farms along what's now Cottonwood Lane on the west side of the river. And Phil Rosen, who many of us in the room knew and loved. He spent years documenting and arguing for the conservation of amphibians and reptiles in the city of Tucson. He found mud turtles in those irrigation canals all the way through the 1990s until the last of those farms were converted to housing and those irrigation canals dried up. So of the original aquatic species in the river, this turtle species made it the longest out of all of them, survived all those habitat changes. But they can't tolerate total drying. So as we know, since the 70s, we've had a couple different wastewater treatment plants putting water into the river. And so one of the initial questions is, well, would those turtles somehow have been able to find that treated wastewater when it was first put into the river, either at Roger Road or at Ina Road? So wondering if that's their new home, if they could somehow get there from somewhere else. And then downtown, where those turtles hung on until the 90s, that started flowing again in 2019, thanks to the city of Tucson, Tucson Water, releasing water there. So that's a question, could turtles somehow have found their way back into there? So what we were trying to do basically is figure out what is the current status of turtles in Tucson in the river. How do these populations vary among different parts of the river? And then if we don't find them, can we reintroduce them into the river successfully now that we have good flow and good water quality in places? So in the city of Tucson, or the metro area, we've got 7 different places from downtown at Star Pass or 22nd Street, all the way out to almost Sanders Road in Moreno. And so these are places that we've surveyed every summer for turtles in conjunction with our Bioacoustic teacher training program that Jacqueline will talk about a little bit later this afternoon. And so we've got multiple years of data at all of these sites. And then just last summer, thanks to Tony Palmer and folks at Tumacácori who are also in the room, we were able to add that as a study site. And so we'll have 1 year of data to show from that, and we'll actually be back out there next week looking for turtles again. So what did we find? We went out to each of these sites, delineated a 50-meter reach, put out turtle traps each day at dusk. We do 4 consecutive nights of trapping, identify, weigh, sex, and mark the turtles. And as I mentioned, we started this in 2022, so we've had 4 years now of surveys across most of these sites. The good news is we do have turtles still, native turtles in the river and in Tucson. So we have our Sonoran mud turtle, and probably not a surprise to anyone who knows anything about the natural world is that we've got a lot of invasives as well. So invasive plants, also invasive turtles. And the common ones we found were the spiny softshell turtle, which is native to the East Coast, Mississippi River drainage, and the pond slider, which I'm sure probably most people are familiar with from the pond trade, also native to the Mississippi drainage. And then we found a few individuals of the river cooter, which is more of a southeastern US species. They've shown up in a few places. So those were probably pet releases that, turtles will live 10, 20, 40 years. And so they might be pet releases that are just hanging on in the river. When we look over the last 4 years in Tucson where we found turtles, we did find native turtles at 3 or 4 of our sites. So at Tangerine Road out in Moreno, Cortera Road, and then Sunset and Camino del Cerro in the city of Tucson. So we were excited to see that. But as you can see from the images, there are other sites that were completely dominated by non-native turtles, and we didn't find any native turtles at all. When we look at the numbers, it's kind of even more of a sad situation. And these are just pie charts showing the percentage of non-native turtles in orange and native turtles in blue. And so you can see, we see way more orange across all of the sites. And it's really just a couple of the sites in Tucson at Sunset and Camino del Cerro where the native and non-native abundance is closer to 50-50. And then I will point out that the downtown Tucson site that's only been flowing since 2019, in our summers of trapping there, we had only found 3 turtles total. So it was clear that a lot of turtles hadn't moved back into that site, but we'll come back to that in a little bit. The other thing we noticed is that all the native turtles we captured are at least 10 or 15 years old. You can age them approximately based on the rings that are on their plastron underneath. And what we found was either many, many rings or the plastron was totally worn, meaning they've had long lives in the river and they've kind of worn off their aged fingerprints. So it's apparent that they haven't been reproducing and having young for quite a while in the river in Tucson, even though they're hanging on in their population. One site that we didn't find any turtles during our standard surveys was at Twin Peaks Road. Thanks to Pima County Flood Control District, they're doing a big project in there called the Cortero Narrows Project, where they were going to be realigning and redesigning the channel. So we worked with Janice Hughes and others from Flood Control District and went in and did more exhaustive surveys just to make sure there weren't any native turtles before that construction happened. So over the last 2 falls, we've trapped at about 120 locations, so a massive effort in about a 2-kilometer stretch of the river. And we did manage to find 2 individual Sonoran mud turtles. So that shows they were still hanging on, but in really, really small numbers. You know, they were outnumbered more than 100 to 1 by non-native turtles. So these 2 turtles that we got out of here before construction activities we'll return and talk about again in a minute. So Tumacácori, very different story. We just have 1 year of data down there, but 100% native turtles, all Sonora mud turtles, no non-native turtles, and multiple age classes. So this little cutie right here, you can actually see the little growth rings. So it's only about 1.5 years, 2 years old. So we found big old adults and small juvenile turtles, so really healthy population there. With 1 summer of sampling, we don't quite have enough data to estimate the population size, but as I mentioned, we'll be back next week. So we're excited to document this population a little bit better. So what we see overall is that in the reaches of the river with a lot of flow, so below Ina Road, that's a big wastewater treatment plant, the average flow is about 30 cubic feet per second. The habitat is really not like our native turtles is used to, and that is where we see this predominance of East Coast Mississippi River drainage turtles, because that habitat is more like they're used to back east. Where we do see our native turtles doing best is either in the Agua Nueva stretch of the river in Tucson, which has much lower base flow, or at Tumacácori, which also has low base flow. So they seem to like the slower flow, you know, wider, shallower channels like we saw historically in downtown Tucson. So I mentioned the downtown site that we only found 3 individual turtles, and those all showed up, we think, after the big monsoon storms in 2021, because there were spiny softshell turtles that likely swam upstream, you know, 5 or 6 miles, because they're really good at getting around, and arrived at the heritage reach, but they didn't last long. The habitat there is not good for them. So we didn't even actually remove them. They, you know, died out on their own, removed themselves. They were gone by 2023. So that meant we had a habitat that had no turtles and potentially was a good reintroduction site. It's got that habitat that's a lot more like the historic habitat. So we thought mud turtles would do well there, right? And so we did a little experiment with Arizona Game and Fish. We had 6 turtles that were rescued from a pond in Tucson, and then the 2 turtles that we rescued from the Twin Peaks Reach. Took those 8 turtles, put them downtown with little radio antennas on them and tracked them to see how they were doing, where they went. And we tracked these 8 turtles twice a month or so for at least 10 months until the radio antenna battery died. And I was a little bit worried putting them into this small little habitat that they might not like it, they might panic and try to go somewhere else like they did historically. But thankfully, this shows all the telemetry data to date. Basically, all those turtles stayed between the outfall of the Heritage Project and the Star Pass Bridge. So they like the habitat down there, they've done well. These individual polygons are kind of the sum of the movements of the individual turtles. So they're all kind of staying close together, but also staking out their own little adjacent turf back and forth. So we're really happy to see this. We haven't seen any evidence of nesting and reproduction there yet, but we did translocate 4 males, 4 females. So we've got the potential for sure. So native turtles are persisting in the Santa Cruz, which is great news, but in really low numbers in most of the reach in Tucson. Those reaches that have habitat that looks most like the river did in the 19th century, those are where we see the turtles doing the best, the native turtles. And it does seem like we can reintroduce them, move them around, and they will adapt and adjust to the habitats we move them to, so we were excited to see that. One thing that all of this made me wonder is in the context of Tucson and our wastewater treatment plants being upgraded in 2013, that kind of is in line with the last time that our native mud turtles successfully reproduced. So what I think, and this is based on observations that we have from the Sonoran mud turtle, a species we work on in Mexico, where they thrive in raw sewage. What I think is that the Sonora mud turtles actually liked the dirtier, smellier Santa Cruz that we had prior to 2013. They were doing just fine there, and their predators and their competitors couldn't survive in that bad water. So what we may have had is several decades of good turtle populations in the river. We clean up the water and we don't prevent the introduction of non-native species, right? That was kind of the missed opportunity. And then since then, the adult turtles can survive. They're big enough, but the juveniles, if they reproduce, the juveniles are just getting eaten by all the non-natives. So unintended consequences of cleaner water. So we're going to continue our turtle surveys for another 2 summers, which we're excited about with a new cohort of Biorets teachers. The Fish and Wildlife Club on campus, the student club, is doing a diet study to see what our most abundant non-native species of spiny softshell turtles are eating. Super excited to continue expanding turtle sampling into Santa Cruz County, including at Mac Hudson's property that we heard about this morning, right down the border, and including at Oso Wash. So we'll be up there. And then we're going to keep looking for opportunities to reintroduce turtles or translocate turtles to the heritage reach, since they seem to be doing well there. So with that, I'm happy to take questions.
I'll kick us off with possibly asking you to speculate, and if it's too much, it's fine. But we have a break in the flow downstream of Agua Nueva before you get to Tres Rios. And as you were in that gradient or transect south to north along Agua Nueva, you're getting more native. Then there's the break. Then when the water comes out from Tres Rios, you have largely none or entirely almost non-natives. If that gap were closed, could you speculate as to whether that would allow for proliferation downstream of the natives, or given how far the non-natives seem to be able to go, would they possibly come back upstream and outcompete?
Yeah.
Or too soon to say?
I don't think there's not enough native turtles in the Agua Nueva reach to serve as a source for the Tres Rios reach, unfortunately. That would be a nice idea. I don't think the connectivity matters that much, only because for years it was connected, you know, and even after the treatment plant remediation, they were connected. So the non-natives have the opportunity to move up there, or they had it, and they still do during the monsoon season. So I think it's more the structure of the habitat favors the natives over the non-natives, or at least keeps them from being excluded. Yeah.
Bring them in the order I saw the hands go.
In doing your turtle surveys, have you considered removing the non-natives as you meet them?
Yeah, it's certainly it's a philosophical discussion. So if I thought we had the chance of actually removing them or reducing their population, I would be in favor of it. There are so many, 100 to 1, that I don't think our little sampling would actually impact the population at all. And so that makes me hesitant to kill them for no ecological reason. And then the other complicating factor is that we're out there with teachers and students, including middle school students, who really don't want to see us cut the heads off of spiny softshell turtles, which is how you euthanize them humanely. So it is, I think, in situations like if there's a limited reach, like if they invaded heritage again, or somebody dumped a bunch of slider turtles into there, then absolutely a removal effort is the way to go. But in a long connected reach, like below Ina Road, it doesn't matter how many you remove, they're going to come from somewhere else. That's just my personal opinion.
Yeah, I think in one of the earlier slides, you mentioned that there was a variety of turtle species historically there. Has there been any effort to reintroduce other varieties that are historically native to this area?
So yeah, there are other native species to the state of Arizona, but not to the Santa Cruz River Basin. So we just have a single native turtle species in the Santa Cruz. It's just the Sonora mud turtle. But there are several other species in different watersheds across the state.
Can you talk a little bit about sweetwater wetland turtles? There's a lot of turtles there.
There are a lot of turtles at Sweetwater Wetlands. We have not done official surveys there, but visually you can see, you know, a ton of red-eared sliders, pond sliders. I think Sweetwater is an opportunity, especially with the city thinking about redesign and remodeling at Sweetwater. If we could get rid of that invasive turtle population there and start over and have the signage out so that people aren't dumping their pets there, I think it could be a great habitat for Sonora mud turtles, absolutely. But in its current iteration, it would not work.
Okay, so we have a question from Zoom from Beryl again. So they ask, what will happen to the turtles during floods? Like, for example, the downtown 22nd North flood. They cannot escape from the river when it floods. So what happens to them?
Turtles are pretty good. So we've seen, you know, the Sonoida subspecies of this, you know, we've seen hurricane floods where it went from dry to 80,000 cubic feet per second in a matter of hours, and the turtle population was not impacted at all. So somehow they figure out, we don't know exactly how, there's some evidence that when it rains hard and the flows come up, they go laterally and they go off to the side. Even downtown, a mud turtle could make its way up the soil cement. There's enough friction there for them to do that. And I think they also seek out, you know, slower water, and they seek out piles of debris and hide behind that during floods, because we really don't see any impact of floods on turtle populations. They've evolved with our floods.
Are there any turtle nurseries or anybody reintroducing native turtles after they've reached like a year or two of age?
Yeah, we don't have an official turtle nursery. There is the Arizona-Sonora Desert Museum has a captive population of Sonoida mud turtles because they're a federally listed species. So they learned how to rear those in captivity, and those will eventually be reintroduced to the wild. But since Sonora mud turtle's not listed, there's not the financial resources to support a turtle farm. But we could get to that situation for sure.
Oh, so I'm interested in how the impact of the prey base in any given stretch of the river, how that affects the variety of species that seem to do better than others.
Yeah, so mud turtles have a very Catholic diet, a very broad diet. Some seasons we see them eating all mesquite pods. Other seasons they're eating all dragonflies. Other seasons they're eating fish. So they're not really prey limited per se that we know of, but certainly the non-native species that are in there that are both preying on them and competing with them, they might be impacting the prey base, you know, and then indirectly impacting the turtles. But yeah, the question is if the prey base is different in different parts of the river. And we actually have a talk a little bit later from Scully Young, who's going to talk about the invertebrate prey base in the river. The short answer is there's some differences, but they're not large differences ecologically.
Michael, thank you. All right, do we have a triple header here with this next presentation? Do we have? Yes, okay, fantastic. All right, so now we're gonna welcome Jules Wyman from Washington University in St. Louis, Melissa Van Kleeck-Hann and Jennifer Becker from Pima County. And they will be talking about remote bioacoustic monitoring for ephemeral-water Anuran conservation.
Sure, yeah.
Sure. Do you want 2 mics?
No, I think we'll just hand them off like relay race here. Yeah, okay, that works. Good. So as you heard, this is going to be 3 presenters. I'm going to talk on the flood control district's context and utility of this work. Jules is going to talk about the data that we've combined, all of our combined data. And then Melissa's going to talk about her conservation and community science opportunities. So let's see. There we go. Flood Control District began acquiring properties after the catastrophic '83 flooding, and helped those properties go back to natural floodplain functions and reducing harm for developed communities. In the late 1990s, we began doing some restoration work on these properties, and around the same time, the county initiated formulation of the Sonoran Desert Conservation Plan. The county administrator approved and mandated that we implement the biological goals of the conservation plan, including restoring riparian areas. So the flood control district then got really busy doing a lot of ecosystem restoration. I managed, co-managed, and advised on many of those projects. And, you know, they usually started with a detailed feasibility assessment and a lot of site monitoring. The site monitoring then continued on through project establishment, adaptive management, and we have other monitoring needs related to that. We also sometimes do pre-project disturbance conservation measures like salvaging lizards and toads ahead of going in there with the bulldozers. And more recently, we have a compliance need in the long term for some of our federal projects. And of those, I was informing our performance targets, and we're trying to figure out how do we afford to continue doing long-term monitoring when I learned that certain researchers of our region were beginning to use the automated recorders for toad call monitoring. It had been tried previously but failed because of changes in the hardware and the software. We were able to roll this out, which is really going to be hugely cost saving because these herpetofauna form a lot of the base of the food chain. When we're doing ephemeral water monitoring, you know, the toads are using this as an aquatic resource, even though it's not there year round. It was a lot of very labor intensive work, but now with these remote things, we can be in many places at once and get a lot of more data. Here's Jules to talk about the results.
Thanks, Jen. Let's see. So yeah, as I think that's all really important context to understand the work I'll be discussing. As Jen mentioned, kind of historically when we went to monitor these frog and toad communities around the Tucson area, we would use very intensive visual encounter survey methods where you'd basically go out, have someone on the ground. A lot of this work was done by Phil Rosen, for example, going out and kind of exhaustively documenting what's at these ephemeral pond sites. So one of the main goals of the project we'll be talking about here was trying to find an alternative that's a little bit less effort intensive. And so we wanted to look into these automated recording units that you can basically just go out, put at a pond, they collect acoustic data for a while, including frog and toad calls. You go get them, download the data, and you can analyze them. And that's much more feasible for some of these efforts where, you know, you have many, many sites you're trying to monitor, and it's really just a few nights where you get a lot of these frogs and toads calling. So it's great to have these automated devices out there if they work. So that was one of the goals, kind of to compare these automated devices with in-person visual encounter surveys. The other goal broadly was to just sort of characterize Tucson frog and toad or Anuran kind of distributions and abundances, and especially to compare how the communities are doing now to some baseline data we started collecting in the early 2000s. What this effort looked like was in 2022, we went out to a bunch of different sites, selected a few key sites to implement these recorders in 2023, and this was an effort of the Flood Control District, and then also Conservation Lands and Resources had several automated recording units as well. And yeah, just briefly, the way these work is you go out, you put them on a tree or something right next to your pond site, and most of these sites were ephemeral ponds, and you can set them to record in a certain frequency range at which our local frogs and toads will vocalize. And we would do this from before the onset of the monsoon rains until after the end of the monsoon season. And we would record for 10 minutes out of every hour from 7 p.m. to 6 a.m. to get that whole kind of nocturnal window at which the frogs and toads will mostly be calling. And at all of our sites, we put these recording units, and then we also did sort of our traditional visual encounter surveys where we would go and look for adults, listen for adults, look for egg masses, and do dip net surveys for tadpoles. So just these very intensive surveys trying to capture all different age classes to characterize kind of who is using our ponds. And we did this at a total of 10 different sites around Tucson and Green Valley. You can see a lot of those sites were concentrated around the Santa Cruz River and its sort of immediate surroundings, because in our preliminary efforts, we'd found that that's sort of the key stronghold for, or one of the key strongholds for our local Anuran communities. So yeah, diving into some of our results. First, this is what the output of these recording units looks like. This is a spectrogram, so on the y-axis you have frequency, on the x-axis you have time, and our different frog and toad species all call, they have one or a couple calls at very distinct frequencies, at very distinct rates, so it's quite easy to identify the different individual species from data like this, and you can do it manually, but we also used software from Wildlife Acoustics that can go through and kind of identify who's calling when based on their distinct vocalization signatures. And so, yeah, before diving into the sort of specific results, wanted to show the 6 different species of native Anuran that we found on these surveys around Tucson and Green Valley, sort of our cast of characters. This is the Couch's spadefoot. On the left is an adult, on the right is a little metamorph or froglet. And I think there's a call in here. This is what they, oh, whoops. Next one. Okay, there's a call on this one. So this, yeah, more Couch's spadefoots. This was a kind of funny interaction I saw in 2023. And yeah, this is what they sound like. So they have a funny kind of honking call. And many of you might be familiar. They're quite common around Tucson, so you hear those on summer nights. This is a Mexican spadefoot. They do this sort of snore. Mazatlan narrowmouth. This high-pitched, very buzzy sort of call. Oh, yeah, standing by. How's everyone doing? So here's your Mexican spadefoot, and yeah, Mazatlan narrowmouth has that kind of high buzzy call. And then we also found 3 different species of bufonids or true toads on our surveys, and this is the iconic Sonoran desert toad, probably the biggest toad in the United States, or one of them. It's a Great Plains toad. This can be very annoying. They do that for a minute or more sometimes, but super cool. And red-spotted toad. So yeah, those are the 6 species of native Anurans we found. And then just wanted to show really quickly what kind of the output, the sort of raw data from one of these spectrograms look like. So there are 3 different species here. 2 of them are frogs and toads. I'll just play this for a second. And so that's the kind of thing you would hear at these ponds on summer monsoon nights. You might recognize a couple of those vocalizations. The higher pitched, sort of longer one is that Mazatlan narrowmouth, and the sort of lower honking is a Couch's spadefoot. And then down at a very low frequency, that's a dog. So we got other things on our recording units as well. So yeah, broadly we found that our automated recording units were really effective at capturing a diversity of Anuran species at the ponds. At almost every pond site, we got the exact same sets of species with our recording units as we did with the visual encounter surveys. There were a couple exceptions where there would be at some sites what we think were probably adults dispersing to those sites to forage or something, but not actively breed. And so they weren't calling at the site, so we didn't get them on the recording units. On the other hand, there were a couple sites where we detected species on the recording units that we didn't find in person. So that was cool to see. But for the most part, we got very similar results at our different sites, which was a really great and sort of very promising result. And yeah, we found that at different sites, we had different sets of species. You can see on the next slide here, these red numbers are the number of native species at each site. And you can see a lot of 4s and 5s along the Santa Cruz River, sort of in Paseo de las Iglesias, and the West Branch Preserve in southwest Tucson, a bit south of where we are now. And so that seems to be a very species-rich sort of area in the region. Lots of really cool native amphibians. A couple of the species-specific results. Couch's spadefoot was our most abundant and widespread native species. We found them at every site we sampled, and in other efforts, we've just found them throughout a lot of Tucson's urban core. I think a big reason for that is they can transform really quickly. So from egg to metamorph or froglet, they take about a week or a little more than a week, so remarkably fast. So they're very arid adapted, and they can use basically these sort of long-lived puddles and sort of ditches and stuff to breed, even within Tucson's very urban core. On the other hand, the Mexican spadefoot, a relative of the couch's spadefoot, was the rarest species on our surveys. They used to be in a lot of those areas along the Santa Cruz. Unfortunately, they seem to be, as far as we can tell, locally extinct at several sites that were former strongholds. We're not totally sure why. They're much more kind of mesic adapted, so they're associated with like cooler and wetter environments than a lot of the other species in our study. And so the warming and drying of the region might have something to do with their decline. We're not entirely sure. On the other hand, more of a success story, the Mazatlan narrowmouth. This is a really cool little frog. It's a member of a family of predominantly tropical frogs. And this species is found mostly in Mexico. It reaches the sort of northeastern edge of its distribution in a few sites in the Santa Cruz and Tucson. And though there's some evidence it's declining around the region, they seem to be doing great at those sites. Comparing to kind of our early data, they seem to still be a lot of these narrowmouths at some key sites, especially like well-vegetated ponds, kind of along the Santa Cruz floodplain in southern Tucson. And they're really kind of unique species of special interest. And yeah, I think one of the big things we are continuing to learn from this study is one of the key determinants of the Anuran community, so like which sets of species you see, is hydroperiod. Different species take different amounts of time to transform. I mentioned the couch's spadefoot can transform in as little as 8 days or so. Some of our other true toads take a month or more. And so they need these longer-lived ponds. But a lot of them still breed predominantly in ephemeral waters because perennial ponds often have more predators of both eggs, larvae, and adults. So fish, various aquatic insects, invasive bullfrogs. And so this kind of sweet spot of ponds that are long-lived enough to allow them to metamorphose, but not so long-lived that they have predators, seem to be where these animals thrive. And yeah, one last quick example, I think it's something that I found very cool, was that a lot of these toads are doing pretty well in fairly urban settings as long as there's some key habitat elements. Like this is a Sonoran desert toad on some bricks, and then we also found red-spotted toads breeding in like riprap pools in places like Julian Wash, so that's like rock structure used for bank stabilization that mimics the kind of rocky canyon pools that species, the red-spotted toad, typically uses to breed. So just kind of a cool example of something that's mutually beneficial for humans and our native wildlife within the city of Tucson. Thanks.
All right, now I get to plug my project. Okay, so how does this data science turn into management? So one of the ways is that if we know the locations of certain frogs, we can inform any kind of projects on Pima County lands, especially in flood-prone areas and drainages, things like that. Also, we can track rare species, so we can track species of like the narrowmouth toads and the Mexican spadefoots. And then we can also provide data for our local research scientists and also local students. But one of the problems here is that all of the stuff that we've been talking about so far is on Pima County lands. And frogs and toads, I don't know if you've ever asked them, but they do not like borders, right? They don't like these fake borders that we put up and property lines. They move across the landscape during the monsoon season, and there's a lot of other areas that they move into as well. So not only are we moving these ARUs onto conservation lands and ranches and in natural resource parks, but we've decided to add to the existing data, we can use community science. So come on. There we go. So in 2024, we started a project called Frog Song. It's an iNaturalist project. And if you were here 2 years ago at the conference, I introduced it. So iNaturalist is a really great app. It allows the participants to make observations of plants and animals, and then scientists and experts identify them. So what we have done is we started a project called Frog Song, and that pulls together all of the audio observations that you can also put on iNaturalist of frogs and toads. So anything that has been tagged frogs and toads in southeastern Arizona is collected by this project. And so before we started this project, there were only about 80 observations in total since 2015. And then in the last 2 years, that has become over 100 observations. So just in the last couple of years, once we introduced this project. It's in southern southeast Arizona, so that means that we're collecting from 4 different counties, but most of our observations, of course, are in the Tucson area and in Pima County. And so you can see on this map, these little blue dots are all the observations that we have had so far in all those places. So there's a lot of data gaps. And so some of those data gaps include the northeast region up here. So you can click. Let me see if this clicker works. Yeah, so the northeast or northwest region is up here, Tucson Mountain Park. We don't have any observations from Tucson Mountain Park. That's a very surprising thing. Also Midtown, all of South Tucson, and the Southeast. So if you want to become a part of this project, there's some sheets like this in the back on that table, and these sheets have a QR code. It tells you how to join our project and all of the directions on how to go out on iNaturalist and how to do recordings instead of just using visual encounters. And I hope that you all take a look and do that. We need more data.
I did bring a couple posters of some of Flood Control District's projects back there if you want to take a look later. And Julia Fonseca helped me get started on a lot of that. And she's sitting back by the posters.
All right. Thank you all 3 of you. Appreciate it. Anybody got a quick question on Zoom? Hold tight. Catwalk.
A question from Beryl of how do we get one of those forms? I think perhaps the form you just mentioned, is that available online?
We can email it. I can send it out.
All right. We'll make a point to share somehow.
Yeah.
All right. Well, thank you all so very much. Woo. All right. And to close out this block of presentations, we are going to invite up Jessica Moreno from the Coalition for Sonoran Desert Protection. And Jessica is going to present on something we got a little sneak peek of yesterday through the Levee, monitoring the success of Pima County's first wildlife ramp. Jessica, come on up. Hold it, you can flip it, but just make sure you're straight.
Yeah. Gotta eat the mic. So if you were here last year for this conference, this will be familiar to you. And I know that there are a number of Pima County floodplain control folks in the audience as well. If you want to raise your hands, I'm going to make you, yep, see. You can thank them for everything you're about to see. You can go ahead and go to the next slide. All right, very briefly, because I know so many of your faces. I work for the Coalition for Sonoran Desert Protection, and we work to save the desert. We do a lot of policy, as well as some community science work. We are a true coalition of about 30, as of today, 30 member groups, organizations, local and national, and in different organizations. So we have a big voice in the community, and that gives us the power to make lots of changes happen. And for the most part, we are working to implement the Sonoran Desert Conservation Plan with Pima County. So Pima County is definitely a very strong partner in all of this work. And we focus on 2 main programs. One is land use planning, and the other is landscape connectivity. And people don't hear the word connectivity very often in the real world. So I usually have to explain that, but wildlife need the freedom to roam. And without that, they can't persist in an area. So a lot of the work that we do is working with transportation planning, with engineers, with city planning to figure out how we can help wildlife to either create if it's been destroyed or to preserve if it's still there, their ability to move across the landscape and get to those core habitat areas that they need. One of the major barriers for wildlife movement in our region in Pima County happens to be what we call the Tucson to Tortolita Mountain Wildlife Linkage. This was identified in 2006 by the Arizona Wildlife Linkages Assessment as one of the priority critical threatened wildlife movement corridors in the state. And as you can imagine, an animal trying to get from the Tortolita Mountains over here has to cross the railroad, the frontage road, the highway, the frontage road, and then the levee. Today, we're going to focus on the levee because Pima County has solved that problem. And this is all very important because at this particular location, we have long-range planning that says at this location, we are going to flatten the highway at some point. It's going to get, I think the plans, it's like before 2035, the plan is to widen Interstate 10 there to 10 lanes, and they're going to flatten it and use the dirt from this underpass at the Twin Peaks interchange, I think, or something along those lines, right? We're growing, and so the highway's growing too. Currently, though, this underpass, which is an abandoned railroad underpass under I-10 near Avar Valley Road, is the only safe place for animals to cross the highway. They still have to navigate the railroad, they still have to navigate the levee, they still have to navigate the frontage roads, but that's their best bet. And up until recently, we didn't even know if animals were using it because it's not a comfortable place to be. The big dream, of course, is that when that construction happens and we widen the road, we'll be able to use funding and mitigation to build a wildlife bridge that spans that highway and that railroad and future light rail, right? But we still have to get past the levee. The levee was another piece of the puzzle that we needed to solve. And Pima County Floodplain Control is so amazing because they were so forward thinking to put in a solution to this now and put it in place now, which just gives us more leverage to finish the project down the road. So what they designed, and you heard about this last year, and you're going to hear more about it because I'm not going to stop talking about it, is that as far as I know, and I've been to international conferences on this topic, this is, as far as I know, the first wildlife ramp design ever. I have not seen anything talked about like this anywhere else in the world. It's very exciting. I'm giddy and nerdy about it. I will give you personal tours. But what they essentially did is this steep soil cement levee, which controls floodwaters, they pushed it back and made a slope that's very specific to certain species requirements. So like, we wanna make sure bighorn sheep will use it. We wanna make sure desert tortoises will use it. If we can get those two across, everything will be happy. So it was designed specifically for that in terms of the incline, in terms of the approach, in terms of the materials and the vegetation and all of that. So now there is a way for animals to get into the Santa Cruz River and back out again past the levee. Previous to that, most animals would not navigate that levee unless they were under high stress and needed to, you know, and most of them could not. So this is a pretty significant achievement here. It's associated with the Huckleberry Loop, and Pima County also put in some interpretive signage there so folks can visit it when that opens up. There's wildlife funnel fencing around it currently. This funnel fencing is designed to keep animals out. And that's specifically because we didn't want to create a door and leave it open onto the highway when there was not a bridge yet to get them safely across. So currently it's closed, but we do have a jump out. So this is looking from inside, the ramps behind us here, looking out towards the Tortolitas. And this jump out is a dirt ramp where animals can approach from the outside and come in. So we have used these a lot in other places around the world. along roadways, and you can see them in Catalina State Park up near there where we have a wildlife bridge. The jump out allows animals to get into the ramp, but not out. And there were a lot of other elements that were put into place too. One of the really exciting things about this project for me was that so many different considerations were taken. It wasn't just let's build a ramp and leave it. There were windrows built for a small animal cover. The erosion control socks, this time around Pima County decided to use something compostable, no plastic. It's awesome. So we're watching to see how that's working. A lot of planting was put in. So it's a big deal. It's a big deal and we should talk about it a lot. But another thing that we have to talk about is, does it actually work? I'm hoping it works for flood control. I expect that to be working. And the first monsoon flood, you can see me out there. I'll be there taking pictures. But the other part of that aspect was, will wildlife use it? So we set up cameras as part of a longer project where we're studying wildlife movement trends from the Tucson to Tortolita Mountains. So we have cameras from Tortolita Preserve all the way to Saguaro National Park and in between. And 2 of those sites are here at the wildlife ramp and at the railroad underpass to see what's happening in those choke points. They're checked monthly by our volunteers. We use an access database for all of our camera data, and volunteers and some help with AI, which is not quite there yet with identifying the species. So I'm jumping the gun a little bit here because these cameras were deployed last fall. We don't have a whole lot of years of data yet to really show you some awesome graphs, but we do have results. So at the wildlife ramp, we have documented 9 different species. And one of those interesting ones was a feral hog. I had to call Pima County and say, did you know there are feral hogs? There aren't. It was an escaped pet and he's back home. He's fine. But yeah, he came to explore the wildlife ramp for us. We have seen all of the species that we expected to see, the most abundant ones, coyotes, javelina, and one that we did not expect to see, a white-nosed coati. White-nosed coati have only been recorded in the Tucson mountains and usually associated with the Santa Cruz River 4 or 5 times ever. So this is a big surprise. That was a cameo. As of yet, though, we have not seen any deer. So that's something that we're keeping an eye on. Keeping in mind, too, that this is a long-term monitoring project. And currently, the restoration work and the work going on at the Narrows is happening simultaneously. There's restoration work happening at El Rio Preserve nearby. So there's a lot of disturbance and will be for probably another year. But it's interesting to watch nonetheless. And then the other big surprise was that animals were indeed using the wildlife underpass. We found 7 different species, including deer. So deer are using the wildlife underpass there. We also saw badger. So that was really cool. Historically, the coalition had a camera project in the Tucson mountains starting in like 2012 or 2015. And we had a camera site that magically some brilliant person put right where the wildlife ramp was going to go. So we have historical data that we can use to compare with now what we're seeing today. And that historical data was about the same. We saw about 8 different species in a short period of time. And what we haven't seen yet at the ramp currently that we saw before was gray fox, raccoon, and rabbits. So we're keeping an eye on that. And there is a pattern, the monitoring work we're doing in El Rio Preserve has also been very low abundance on rabbits, which isn't good because that's food. We want lots of it. And the mesocarnivores too. So we're keeping an eye on that and that pattern as we move forward with this. And then there's some other things we're hoping to see too. I really want to see deer. A bighorn would be wonderful, but that's like a once in a lifetime thing. But we want to know that deer will use it. I want to see kit foxes. This is a kit fox. Our cameras have picked up a small population of kit foxes on the east side of the highway on Pima County lands. And they're doing great. And I have cute video. I should have put video of them. So I'm hoping to see some kit foxes. We want to see the desert tortoise. We have mountain lions on the west side of the highway on our cameras. We have a female that is a resident and has young pretty regularly and moves around in that area. So we know they're there. I'm watching the skunks and the mesocarnivores again. Those omnivore, small to medium-sized animals that are really good indicators of ecosystem health. And then, you know, the food. We need to know where the rabbits are going. So this whole project is, I think like 60 cameras, 40 cameras now, can't remember. And I have an annual report that comes out. So if you want to read the whole project report and how that little piece fits into it, you can download that from our website and read that and follow along as we continue to update on that. Across the whole site, oh yeah, see, I'm smart, I write it down, 40 cameras. 40 cameras, 60 species. And just recently, the coalition reached 1 million verified wildlife photos across all our projects. So that's exciting. Yeah, it is. And one of the other really cool outcomes of this too is I think the wildlife ramp clearly works for wildlife. Wildlife are using it. And Pima County has created an advisory team to look at other places where these ramps might be able to be implemented and built in other places too. It's just like so straightforward and perfect to be able to think animals naturally are using our waterways and our dry auroras as corridors. How are we helping them get in and out when those corridors meet up with adjacent open space or protected areas? So we're working on that, and hopefully we'll build more of them. And again, it's a first, so it's very exciting to see even the preliminary results of this. And I hope to see more, and I'm gonna keep talking about it because it's awesome. And I fully, can I say? Well, Jen Becker just told me, so. The wildlife ramp just recently won a national award in civil engineering. So anyway, it's impressing more than just the biologists. Yeah, Deidre and Nanda. Yeah, Nanda is the engineer, correct? For this project. Yep, and Deidre. This is their baby. And Nanda, especially, if you meet him, talk about this and say how cool it is. He's so humble, he won't say anything. He won't say he won an award. But I'm very excited about it, and I know that the road ecology community is gonna be very excited about seeing how this works out over time too. So that's all I have. That's the big vision. Any questions?
Great job. Yeah. Thank you so much. Any questions in the room? We definitely have had a couple of years of presentations on this. So it's like you said, it's so nice to sort of see the maturity of this.
Yeah, I almost feel bad because I am like, I can't wait to talk about what we've seen yet, but we're sure like a few years away from getting really good results on it. But.
Excellent. Oh, here we go. Hey, Catherine.
Who can we talk to encourage the big one to actually happen over the I-10?
So that's the project. That's the big story. We know we have bighorn sheep in the Silver Bell Mountains, the population. We have seen bighorn sheep in the Tucson Mountains. 2 appeared in the Tucson Mountains in 2017, and they came across the Cap Canal Wildlife Bridge to do it. They were exploring right around this little area that we're talking about here with the wildlife ramp. And we know we have a reintroduced population that's doing extremely well in the Catalina Mountains and a wildlife bridge that connects the Catalina Mountains and Tortolita Mountains now. So there's just one piece left to connect. And if we can stitch that wound up, I think the possibility of having bighorn sheep be able to move from the Silver Bells or the Autumn Reservation over to the Tortolita Mountains and to the Catalinas and back and forth is really good. They're not going to live and stay in the Tucson Mountains because they don't have the correct habitat there, but they can use that as a staging area to kind of move between places. So that is one of the species that we definitely are looking at as a sign of success in this area. Although for me, just getting a tortoise or a badger across makes me happy. So
there's the big horn, but also I think the big one. Well, how do we get the big one across?
Oh, the big one.
I mean, both are.
I'm talking about bighorn sheep, sorry. The big one, the big bridge. So we have plans in place to really advocate for that, and we're already beginning to make movements toward that. Whether you voted for it or not, you can be happy that the RTA Next plan includes $50 million for wildlife crossing structures. So that money can be match for federal dollars or help in many ways for that, towards that project. There's also a number of other funding mechanisms that we're looking at, including private funding through, I can't remember the name of the foundation, but they funded the LA Wildlife Crossing. Anaheim. Yep. That bridge. So they have that happening right now, and they're starting to do fundraising and funding for other projects around the nation. And we also have the National Corridors Act, which gave us a little bit of funding for wildlife corridors and crossings too. So it's kind of watching for legislation, making sure that our elected officials know what we care about and that we want these things, and really pushing for it. In the meantime, we are gathering the data we need to show that animals are using it. We're doing roadkill surveys at the same time to advocate for the need as well. And that's a difficult one because in this area, linkage is so broken, we don't actually see a whole lot of roadkill. And most of these projects get funded based on human fatalities from like elk strikes and things like that. So that's the priority for ADOT essentially in Arizona, understandably so. So we are kind of contending with that too.
So you're just describing how, you know, the Tucson Mountains are increasingly isolated, and there's kind of a remediation needed, you know, to reconnect it to the Tortolitas. But at the same time, there's also the threat of the interstate in Avra Valley. Can you give us an update on the I-11 proposal? And also, is there a relationship between like the funding for that, and does that jeopardize this potential for, you know, reconnecting over across the I-10 on the east side of the Tucson Mountains?
It's a big question. If you have a quick answer, that would be.
It's good. Yes, I-11 is one of the biggest threats we have in Avra Valley, or actually in Pima County, I would say, for our biodiversity, countywide, regionally. The good news is that mitigation from that project, whether it's co-located with I-10, which is what we want, or not, mitigation money can help fund these things. And you can bet we're going to be pushing really hard for all the mitigation we can get, regardless of whether they try to build a new one or co-locate it with I-10, which is what we're pushing for. Right now, there's not a whole lot to update on that particular project because it's all in the legal system right now. But you can check our website for updates and action opportunities at any time.
There we go. Jessica, thank you. Great presentation. So as we dive back in, folks ought to be prepared for, and we're good on Zoom, just to double check? Okay. Please do just keep using the resource that is this conference. I'm glad to have these conversations happening in the sidebars. I hate to break them up because I know that there are legitimate plans underway, and all I want is for people to scheme and continue to make this river expand and build the community. And we're gonna keep that theme moving here. So first up, we're gonna welcome Rocío Guzman from the University of Arizona. And Rocío is going to be presenting on community dynamics of aquatic invertebrates in the Santa Cruz River at Tumacácori National Historical Park. This is a decadal study, so we're looking at data from 2012 to 2022. Rocío is already up here, thank you. Let's give it up for Rocío.
Thank you. Thank you for having me. As Luke said, my name is Rocío Guzman. I am a PhD student in natural resources at the University of Arizona. And before I start talking about aquatic invertebrates, I want to go briefly through a little bit of the history of Tumacácori National Historical Park that I'm sure that many of you already know better than me. Well, Tumacácori is located in Santa Cruz County. It was originally inhabited by the Tohono O'odham, and in 1691, it was established as a mission. Then in 1908, it was federally protected as a national monument. And then, as we all know, in the 40s, the Santa Cruz River stopped flowing perennially due to water overuse. Then in 1951, the Nogales International Wastewater Treatment Plant was built. It treats water from both Nogales, and it releases treated effluent into the Santa Cruz River, and this water reaches Tumacácori. In 2009, this treatment plant was upgraded to be able to remove biological nutrients too. So streams everywhere around the world are very deeply impacted by climate change and also water overuse for agriculture and also for expanding urban areas. And we know that the Santa Cruz River has a long history of impacts, but how are these impacts affecting aquatic life in the Santa Cruz? Well, the good thing is that the National Park Service has a stream monitoring program, and we at the University of Arizona are collaborating with them in a project to understand the long-term changes in aquatic invertebrates and how these changes are related to stream flow and climate change. This project is in multiple parks of the southwestern US, which is an area that has been impacted by climate change, especially with drought. And aside from all of the water quality factors that the National Park Service measures in the sites, they also perform aquatic invertebrate samplings. So basically, what you need to do to sample aquatic invertebrates is to go to the river, disturb the ground, and catch them with a net in the water. It sounds very simple, but once you're in the field, it's not that simple. And that is because aquatic invertebrates are very good indicators of stream health. And they can give us a look into a longer term than the snapshot that we get when we just measure water quality. So for Tumacácori and these presentations, we want to answer two questions. How have aquatic invertebrates changed, and how are they affected by water quality? So for this, the National Park Service performs yearly surveys of aquatic invertebrates in each one of the parks. For Tumacácori, they perform them in spring. Then those samples that they get, they send them to the National Aquatic Monitoring Center at the Utah State University, and they identify and process all of these samples of aquatic invertebrates. They count them, and they generate a database. This database, the National Park Service sends it to us, and we do the data cleaning, the data management, and we are just analyzing the years from 2012 to 2022. And for the analysis, we used are in many packages, including the ones that are listed here. So what we got is that the total richness of aquatic invertebrates in Tumacácori is 62 taxa. The richness is not in terms of species, because for aquatic invertebrates, many times it's difficult to identify down to species. So many times the identification is to genus or to family, and this number includes all of that. And this number, 62, is relatively low compared to other sections of the Santa Cruz River that also receive effluent water. And you will see in the next presentation more about that. But just as an example, in the heritage reach of the Santa Cruz, you can find even over 100 taxa. And those 62 taxa are not always found, like all the time, in Tumacácori. And you can see in these plots how the richness has changed throughout the year, with the highest richness in 2013 with 28, and the lowest richness in 2019 with just 13. We also looked at the number of individuals, and this plot is representing the density. So it's individuals per square meter. The colors represent the groups of the invertebrates that are found. And the first thing we can see is that even though the numbers vary a lot throughout the years, they are more or less represented by the same proportions of groups. So in Tumacácori, the Santa Cruz is represented mostly by aquatic flies and midges, and also by mayflies. The aquatic flies are represented in yellow, and mayflies in green. And something different happened during 2015. That year, we had a ton of snails, over 2,000 snails per square meter, and almost no aquatic flies and basically no mayflies during that year. And that is because in September of the year before, Hurricane Norbert hit Arizona. And during those days, the flow rate at Tumacácori was of about 3,000 cubic feet per second. And that removed the sand that you can find in that reach. So the next year, this plot that you see on the right is data by the National Park Service. And during that spring of 2015, the proportion of sand dropped. So it was mostly gravel and bigger rocks that are new habitat that the snails can populate. We can also look at the tolerance values. Tolerance values go from 0 to 10, and the lower the value that an invertebrate has, it means that they are very sensitive to water quality, so that means that they cannot survive bad water quality very well. And on the opposite side, the higher the number, the more tolerant those aquatic invertebrates are, and they can survive bad water quality. So if we take into account all of the densities and the tolerance values of each one of those aquatic invertebrates, we can see how the water quality changes throughout the years. So the cool thing to see here is that it remains mostly in fair and good water quality throughout the years, even though it is effluent water, except for 2015, where we had the snails, because snails are very tolerant, so the water quality that year was probably not that good. But it's very impressive because this is treated wastewater that is actually of good quality that is reaching Tumacácori. We also looked at the sensitive groups. In the case of the Santa Cruz River, the sensitive invertebrates are caddisflies and mayflies. And there was a study that was published in 2003 by Boyle and Fraley, and they had multiple sites along the Santa Cruz River. And one of the sites that is closest to Tumacácori is Carmen, which is about 1 mile north of Tumacácori. And in their study in 1997 and 1998, they found only 2 and 1 mayflies species at Carmen. But if we compare it to our data, we can clearly see that the richness is way higher. But not only that, we also have caddisflies now. Now, if we cannot really compare the density of all macroinvertebrates that we found with that study, but we can compare the density of one mayfly genus, the Falcion mayfly. And we can see that in 1997, they found about 130 individuals per square meter of this sensitive mayfly. But then in our data, we can find way more individuals of that mayfly. So all of these changes are most probably due to the upgrades that the Nogales International Wastewater Treatment Plant had in 2009. These two plots are just two of the many water quality factors that we can measure in the river. And you can see on the left, it's ammonia, and on the right is electrical conductivity. And these two were the ones that showed the biggest differences between before the upgrades and after the upgrades. And you can clearly see how the values were pretty high before that dashed line that represents 2009. And then the values dropped afterwards. So this is very important because first, ammonia, if it's in high levels, it can be very toxic, especially for aquatic life. It can affect their reproduction, their development. It can even cause death. And in the case of electrical conductivity, it's representing the amount of dissolved minerals in the water. And this, if we have very high levels of dissolved minerals, it can affect the osmoregulations of the cells. So what this means is that the proportion of salts and water within the cells of aquatic living beings can be altered, and it can affect their function and even cause death too. So this is great that we're looking at an actual change in the water quality in Tumacácori. So finally, changes in flow, but especially flooding, can have drastic impacts in the aquatic invertebrate community. But invertebrates are capable of recovering, and we can see that in the data. And the wastewater treatment upgrades have benefited not only water quality, but also the invertebrates. And this is very important today. So having high quality effluent water in the Santa Cruz River, but especially in protected areas such as Tumacácori, can provide a refuge for all aquatic life so that they can survive and be protected against drought and water overuse in general. Thank you so much.
Okay, and we are right back on time. Thank you. So we do have opportunity for questions. Okay, good. And I got to back up one after you.
Thank you for this data-rich presentation. So it looked like there was a decline in the density of invertebrates and also maybe in some of the species as well, species richness over time, and that it was sustained over a number of years. And to what extent do you think that's a real signal instead of something that has to do with change in sampling methods, for instance, and what might be causing it?
Thank you for the question. It's the sampling methods have remained basically the same throughout time. So it's most probably not that. Those changes are actually still a little bit of a mystery for us. We're still trying to find any patterns that are emerging. But right now, just looking at the water quality data that we have and the flow data that we have, they don't seem to be related to them. So either once we have linear models and more of that, we will find what exactly is changing that, or maybe there's something else, something outside of Tumacácori that maybe during the monsoon storms or during some kind of runoff is coming to the river, and maybe it's something that isn't even measured. So right now, I don't think I can answer that question fully, but I'm hoping that we can answer that question in the future.
Great. Second questions? Okay. Rocío, thank you so much. Fantastic. All right, and now we are going to bring up the fully prepared Scully Young. Scully is going to be presenting, Scully from the University of Arizona, will be presenting on long-term aquatic invertebrate community dynamics in 4 different reaches of the Santa Cruz River here in Tucson. Scully, come on up.
So that's forward, back. Forward.
Cool. Right down the barrel. Feel free.
Awesome. Hello. All right. So as Luke introduced me, I am Scully Young. I work with the School of Natural Resources at the University of Arizona. And today I'm going to be talking about the aquatic invertebrates in some different reaches here in our local Santa Cruz River effluent-dependent areas. So a little bit of an introduction, which is probably a review for a lot of us. Historically, our perennial reaches here in Tucson were groundwater fed in the early 1900s. This due to, overuse of the water, the river dried up. And so now, since the 1950s, all of our base flow here in the Tucson and Moreno area has been 100% treated wastewater. Initially, this wastewater was kind of poorly treated. It wasn't able to support a ton of aquatic life, but then due to the treatment plant upgrades done in 2013, now it is very high quality effluent water and it supports a ton of biodiversity. We have multiple different effluent release sites that have varying histories and management, and we also still have our natural floods from our summer and winter rains. So taking a look on a map, these 4 dots along the river here are showing our different effluent release sites. So we have our 2 purple dots are the Agua Nueva and Tres Rios water reclamation facilities, which have been flowing for more than 50 years. And they have been that high quality effluent release since 2013. And then we have down further south on the map, the 2 green dots. That is the one that is a little bit further north is the Santa Cruz Heritage Project, which thanks to Tucson Water has been releasing water since June 2019. And then the further south point is the Tucson Airport Remediation Project, or TARP plant releases, which started in November 2021. And you can take a look at how our sites here line up with the river. So we have Tangerine furthest to north is sort of our comparison reference site because that's in that reach that has been flowing for more than 50 years. It's been very consistent flow out there. And then jumping down to this blue site, Star Pass, that's going to be right at the Heritage Reach, right near the release. Just downstream of Star Pass, we have Cushing, which receives the same flow from the Heritage Project, just going a little bit further. And then we have Irvington at the TARP release. So taking a look at graphically what the flow is actually looking like. So these graphs are representing how much cubic feet per second of water is flowing through the site. We can see that Tangerine here has this sort of high base flow where it is peaking, and these big peaks, which this graph is also on a log scale, so you can kind of imagine how big these floods are. These big peaks are from our monsoons. I'm realizing, is this the correct presentation? This might be the wrong slides, sorry. I believe this might be my, yeah, this doesn't have the full data set.
Yeah, this is the one marked.
Okay. This is my last year presentation slides, I believe.
I can load up this one, which is the original one that
Okay.
was the, like, not perfect reappropriation.
Yeah,
of the
we can
Google
do,
slide one.
that one will at least have the correct graphs, so we
Okay.
can do that one.
Cool. Yeah,
Okay.
gotcha.
My transitions might be weird, but we'll have the correct data on the screen, so that'll be better. Apologies for technical difficulties. Okay. Right back into it. First, I told you it'd be weird. Okay, first we can look at some pictures of what these sites look like. So we have up in the top left, that's what Tangerine is looking like. It has very consistent high base flow. So we can see there's a lot of water at this site. It looks like a pretty big stream. And then we have on the top right over here, Star Pass, which has lower base flow, so we can see the water is a bit shallower, and we're seeing kind of pooling and meandering at Star Pass. And then we have here Cushing. This site's kind of characterized water-wise by having really long dry periods. So we'll kind of get into why that is the case, but you can see when water reaches Cushing, it's a little stream, a little creek. And then Irvington, this is our newest site where the flow started in November of 2021, and there are recurring drying periods, with the flow being turned on and off for a variety of different reasons. So, okay, this does work. Okay, so looking at these graphs, Tangerine, high base flow, we have the peaks from, and we have more peaks because this is 2019 to 2024, summer and winter rains causing those floods. Then we have here at Star Pass, we're seeing those peaks from the summer and winter floods. We're also seeing that the base flow is relatively lower than it is at Tangerine. And then we're also seeing a couple periods of time where the flow is actually turned off. So the big one where the flow is turned off for a couple of months is this bulldozing annotated portion of the graph. That is when basically sediment builds up in those concrete levee channels over time, and every couple decades the county has to come in and bulldoze that sediment out, or else when it floods, the flood would just pour over the levee into neighborhoods, and that would not be good. So that is where that bulldozing happened in 2020. We can see in Cushing, the bulldozing also affected this part of the reach. It's very close to Star Pass. And then what we're also seeing in Cushing is that after these huge 2021 monsoon floods, that a bunch of sediment was deposited at this site and basically increased the infiltration rate of the water. So now there isn't surface flow year-round that actually reaches Cushing Road. So that's these long stretches of dry periods that we're seeing at Cushing. And it's only really flowing at Cushing now when there's a heavy rain that's able to supplement that. And then at Irvington, we have the TARP discharge starting in 2021. And we can see, as I mentioned, that the flow is turned off in multiple periods. And some of these times it's turned off, it's just for a couple hours, less than 24 hours, but sometimes it's for longer stretches of time. So getting into what we were looking at, first question, we're looking at how do these changes in flow regime, so flooding and drying events, how are they affecting the aquatic invertebrate diversity in the Santa Cruz River? We're also wondering which species are standing out for either doing really well or poorly during these flooding and drying events, and then how do these flow release management practices affect aquatic invertebrates? So the way we went about answering that is we did monthly aquatic invertebrate sampling at all 4 of these sites. The sampling period was from 2019 to it says 26, it will be done in 26, but it's 2025. We sorted and identified these aquatic invertebrates in the lab, and then we're able to calculate species richness and community composition from that, and then compare the values between the different sites through drying and flooding. So taking a look at the actual results. These graphs are showing the taxon richness over time at each of the sites. So what we're seeing is the number of different types of aquatic invertebrates at a site when we sampled it. So first taking a look at Tangerine, our kind of reference site, we're seeing they're falling relatively in the 20 to 40 species range. There's peaks and valleys, but a lot of this is seasonal variation and variation with the rains as well, which you can see is very consistent when compared to Star Pass, which we're seeing a lot higher peaks and valleys. We're seeing that period of time where there's nothing there because it was dry. And yeah, we're seeing just greater species at periods of time, a lot more jumping around of the species richness from month to month. And then Cushing, we're seeing relatively the same story as Star Pass, but we're seeing after 2021, those long stretches of dry periods. There's no invertebrates there when it's dry because they need water. And then Irvington starting later. We have a couple dry periods, but you might notice on this graph that you're not seeing like as many dips as you saw on the water graph. That's because a lot of those drying periods were for just short periods of time. So they're happening between samples, which we're seeing Irvington, the species richness isn't getting as high as it does at Cushing or at Star Pass. And that's probably kept low because there are these recurring drying periods happening. And then just to put a couple annotations on there, we have the bulldozing that happened. That's why it drops to 0 here. It's Star Pass and Cushing. And then also those pretty huge monsoon floods of 2021 and 2022. We're seeing that is causing a dip in taxon richness, like here at Tangerine and at Star Pass. That's because a lot of the bugs get washed downstream, but then they're able to bounce back a month or so later. And then interestingly, because Cushing is dry, those flood events are actually what's facilitating things to come back to a site like Cushing, because there wasn't water there before, and Star Pass is able to wash down a ton of species. Okay, so another type of analyses that we did are these community composition over time analyses. So this is taking into account species richness, but it's also looking at like density and all sorts of factors about the entire community that we sampled. So points that are really close together on these graphs, those are going to be communities that are really similar, whereas points that are further apart are more different. So this is just looking at all of our Tangerine samples throughout the study period, and these points are relatively very clustered together. And then we're seeing like these 2 points out to the right. Those are during those big flood events. It's shifting the community over time. And another thing that we can look at is sort of the indicator species. These are species that are unique and common at these different sites. So at Tangerine, we have all of these guys, which is very fun. Then at Star Pass, we're seeing a bigger spread of points, a lot more variety in the communities, but we're also seeing a lot of points that, these points on the left side of the graph that are clustering, that's when the water, the flow is consistent at Star Pass. We're seeing communities that are more similar to Tangerine and are generally more stable. They're less different from each other, whereas these are like the post-drying and post-big floods. These are our indicator species at Star Pass. And at Cushing, we can see a very similar story to Star Pass, which makes sense because it is right downstream. And then with Irvington, we're also seeing that big spread. And when you kind of look at how the spread looks, Irvington is spread out wide, but all 3 of these like newer sites are doing pretty similar things in terms of like when they're experiencing these intense flooding and drying events that are shifting the communities pretty drastically. So we can also look at the impacts on individual taxa, and what we found is that these long-lived mayfly, damselfly, and caddisfly species, they need stable flow conditions. These are showing up in the samples that are all on that left side of the graph. They're where there is consistent, stable flow at the sites. We have a few species that are resistant to drying. We have these really resistant midge larvae and also these winged beetles who are able to fly and, get away or come back after flooding or drying events. But nobody's really thriving, but these guys are pretty good at tolerating flood or drying. And then for flooding, there's no big impact on flooding on specific species. All of our species have adapted with our rains, so it makes sense that they're all able to kind of bounce back within a month from flood events. So summarizing, the flooding impacts are fleeting, drying is reducing species diversity and changing community composition. Only a few beetle and true fly species are really resistant to drying, and recovery from the drying can happen pretty quickly if a perennial refuge is upstream. So like Cushing has that sort of bank of Star Pass upstream that's able to bring things down. But in isolated reaches like Irvington, we're seeing that it takes longer for there to be ecosystem recovery. And then based on this, we have the management recommendations of keeping base flow consistent, which is increasing aquatic diversity. Even those short-term drying events at Irvington can harm ecosystems, and multiple outfalls closer together could facilitate ecosystem recovery. Thank you. Is there?
Right. And we have time for questions. We've done some comparative assessments here all along the river corridor. Sorry, Dan. No. Just queuing up more.
Thank you. Really cool presentation. I was curious, I don't know too much about the local aquatic invertebrates. Are there any non-native species? And if so, do you see differences in the sites in the non-native species, or are they pretty much entirely native?
I feel like Michael has a better answer to this question. I actually don't know which are native. And
yeah, it's kind of one of the mysteries of Santa Cruz that it's an urban, totally artificial stream right now, and yet there's almost no non-native invertebrates. So crayfish are exceedingly rare in the river and are non-native pests everywhere else in the state. And just this last semester, my class found some Asian clams out in the river in Moreno, which normally are abundant in every other modified stream in the state, but are really rare in the Santa Cruz. So I don't know why. I mean, it's a blessing, but for some reason, non-native aquatic invertebrates are not abundant in the Santa Cruz.
Anything that is missing or sort of would mark a further evolution in the recovery of macroinvertebrates? Like, you know what I'm saying? Like, who's got this one?
Sorry, I have a pet species we could talk about. So one thing that's missing here, a whole order of aquatic insects, are the Dobson flies or the Megaloptera, and I'm sure they were in the river historically, but they love the interface between groundwater and surface water. So they love to be down just under the surface. So I don't think we would ever get those back until we restored groundwater levels in Tucson. But that's the main one that's missing. Maybe in the San Pedro, there's a single species of winter stonefly that survives. So maybe if we got that groundwater back, that species would also come back. But luckily we have, what is in our data set, 197 species or something. We have a crazy diversity in the city. It's amazing.
I'm not saying anything's lacking. All right. Well, with that, Scully, great job. Thank you. Okay. Moving right along, we're going to invite up Katerina Sacoman from the University of Arizona, who will talk to us about wetland plant community dynamics in response to differing site histories and changing hydrological conditions along the Santa Cruz River here in Tucson. Thanks, Kat.
Okay. Hi, I'm Katerina Sacoman. I study the wetland plants in the Santa Cruz River. have since graduated and I'm now a teacher, but I love the Santa Cruz River so much that I spend my weekends and summers still out there. So As Scully just talked about, and as most of us know, the city has been putting treated wastewater. Effluent just means any kind of wastewater, but here most recently they've been treating the wastewater in a couple different spots in the river. And so we're looking at how these spots are recovering or restoring since the water's been added. And I am helping answer this question by looking at the plants. The reason we use plants to answer this question is because they're often the first established. Obviously, the animals can visit the river, but they will not live in the river unless they have a habitat to live in. So here are some of the plants that we see often. First, we have the water speedwell with the little purple flowers. This is one of my favorites just because it's really cute, but it also lives right on the bank of the river, so it requires a lot of water. So all of these plants and all the plants I'll be talking about today are wetland plants, so they need a wetland to be able to survive. Next, we have the Gooding's willow, which is a super important native species. It has super shallow roots, so it needs a lot of water to be able to grow, especially the saplings. So that's a problem we have a lot of places is we have the willows, but they're not able to recruit more willows. We have the cattails, which we mostly only see in the river, except we've seen them a couple times where there's been leaky pipes near gas stations and stuff, but point being that they require water to grow. And then the smartweed can grow a little bit farther off the bank. So all of these other ones tend to grow right where the water is, but the smartweed can grow a little bit more in the sandier banks, but we've only ever seen it in rivers and washes. So the questions that I'm gonna go over today is, how do the wetland plant communities vary among the different reaches? So I'm looking at a bunch of different spots along the river that have had effluent for different amounts of time. And then the heritage site that we've been hearing about that's had water since 2019, we've actually been collecting data at that site for 5 years now, so we can look at that site more specifically. And then I will compare the heritage site and the Irvington site, which are 2 sites with the most recent effluent additions. So this map that you all have seen many times now, one difference from what Scully was just talking about is we actually have a control site a little farther south at Drexel Road. So that site does not have any effluent, does not have surface flow unless there's a super huge storm, super rare. And then we have at Irvington Road, which has had water since November 2021. And then Heritage since 2019, Sunset since the 50s, and then all the way up north, Tangerine has had effluent since the 1970s. One other thing that I will point out, well, I'll show you the pictures first. Okay, so Drexel Road, that's just an idea of what this looks like. This is a picture from the bike path. Super dry, we don't really see surface water, we don't see any wetland plants. All the plants in here are generally upland plants. And then at Irvington and Heritage, so Irvington, I had to put 2 pictures because it doesn't look like there's a lot going on in the first picture, but then when you look right at the outfall, you can see all the cattails and willows, a lot more exciting. And then Heritage, this is a picture I took this past summer, right in the middle. I'm probably standing in a couple inches of water, and there's cattails, willows, even a cottonwood, very exciting. But the other thing I wanted to point out is that these 2 sites are in the middle of the city. These are urban sites. So they also have this wall that you can see with the soil cement. And so the river is being contained to prevent flooding because people live nearby. But then our sites at Sunset and Tangerine are farther up in Moreno, not near where people live, so they have not been channelized. And the river is more free to meander and change depending on flow. You can see also in this site, there's a lot more larger trees because the site has been receiving water for a lot longer. So how did we collect this data? We put a transect tape perpendicular to the flow of the river, and we have our quadrat that's 3/4 of a meter. And you can see we place it here and we identify all the different wetland species that are in the quadrat. Different from a lot of how other people collect data, we didn't count how many of each species or the density. Even though we knew that this would limit the types of data analysis we could perform, we did this on purpose so that we knew we could commit to continuing to collect data every single summer. We do this with the Bioacoustic teachers that Jacqueline's going to talk about later. And also Michael and me sometimes do that with we always do that with a class that he teaches in the fall. And so we are able to do this pre-monsoon, which is also hard to plan around. Obviously, we never know when we're going to get our storms. And so being able to do this quickly just helps us a lot to be consistent and have consistent data. So the one way that we can analyze data is looking at species richness. So species richness is the number of different species present at the site, again, only looking at wetland species. So we have our sites, and we have been collecting data at these 5 sites for the past 2 summers. You can see Drexel Road. There are a couple wetland trees that have been there for a while. That's what those ones are. And then, of course, all of the other ones have a greater species richness than the dry site, which makes sense. You can see that Heritage and Irvington are still having increases in species richness from year to year because they are still being established and they've had water more recently. Whereas Sunset and Tangerine over time as well, there's not as big of a difference and not always increasing in species richness because the sites are a little bit more established. Okay, so some of the species that we saw there, this is the most common species across all sites in those 2 years. The most common was the Gooding's willow, which is this one. The one that I mentioned has shallow roots, a really good indicator of shallow groundwater and consistent flow. There's also salt cedar, which is a non-native species and often outcompetes the willow. So salt cedars require a lot of water, and they also can add salt to the water, which makes it hard for the native species to grow. They also grow a lot more quickly, and the saplings are not as sensitive as willow saplings. So they often outcompete the willows. Johnson grass, which is a riparian grass. I have seen it in like drier washes, but never not in a wash. And then the smartweed that I mentioned, that grows a little farther up the bank, and then cattails. This is another way to visualize the data. So I made a word cloud. We can see, of course, still the Gooding's willow, salt cedar, Johnson grass, smartweed, but also representing some of the other species that we saw less frequently. Okay, and then this is looking at the sites year specific instead of all of it combined. So we can see that at Drexel Road, salt cedar, desert willow, so trees only. At Irvington Road, we see that the cattails came more recently, and then, or longer ago, and then the Gooding's willow more recently, which is really exciting that trees are being established there. The Heritage site, smartweed, and then cattails, Sunset, consistent Gooding's willow in both years, so not a lot of change there. And then at Tangerine Road, the salt cedar was the most common species in both of these years. Again, not a lot of change there. So now I'm gonna dive a little deeper into the Heritage site. We have here, this is where the water's been coming out, Star Pass Road. So the history that we've all been hearing, but it had perennial flow historically until the early 1900s when the city was growing a lot of groundwater pumping. And then the city started putting the treated wastewater there in 2019. However, in 2020, they had to do a sediment removal to help prevent flooding in the neighborhoods, which removed nearly all of the vegetation, except they left a small patch of vegetation right near the outfall to help have seeds and plants there for when the water did come back so it could get established more easily. There was a super big flood in 2021, which did knock out most of the plants and change the channel pattern. But for the last 3 years, the flow has been a lot more consistent. Now we get to watch a really cool time lapse. So this is if you're standing on Star Pass Bridge looking south. So you can see this is where the water first comes in. You can see right there, there's algae and smartweed coming in, which are often some of the first to establish. And you can start to see some cattails are coming in. And then soon we'll wait for the flood. Okay, there it is. And then again, we start to see the algae tends to be the first thing to come in. And then there's speedwell there. And I'm sure very soon we will see cattails start to come in. And so one thing that we can notice as well is that over time, more larger plants are able to establish. So the smaller plants are coming in first, and then as the water is consistent, the larger plants are able to be established. There's a really big willow there, which is super exciting. Oh, these are monthly photos starting in 2021, I believe, until this most recent winter. So that's why we're seeing all the seasons in the willow losing the leaves in the winter. Okay, so this is how the species richness, so the number of different species present at heritage over time. We see a general upward trend, and it is still increasing the number of species. So the community is continuing to grow. The most common species we saw, this is across all of the years. So speedwell over all the years was the most common. Duckweed, which are little tiny floating plants on the river. Green algae, which tends to come when it's first being established because there are no plants yet. And then the cattails and the smartweed. And then this is in each year. So we see in the first year, the green algae came, and then the duckweed and speedwell, these first plants to be established. Speedwell again was the most common species in 2022. And then in 2023 and 4, we have smartweed. So it's that we had plants taking up more space. And so the plants were, as we were traveling away from the actual water flowing, we had more plants taking up space. And then the cattail. So we also see that the plants that are at heritage are getting bigger over time, or the most common plant is getting bigger over time. So now we can compare heritage to Irvington. Irvington has had effluent since November 2021. This comes from the Tucson Airport Remediation Project, the TARP project. This has flow most of the year, but prone to temporary shutoffs due to just how the treatment plant works. So if we compare these two, a species richness at Irvington Heritage, you can see both of them have upward trends. We also see that the gap is getting smaller. So Irvington is able to close the gap. One other thing I want to point out too is that 2022 would be about 2 or 3 years since Heritage had water. And then 2025 would be about 2 or 3 years since Irvington has had water. And you can see that they're about the same. So Irvington is catching up very quickly. Most common species by year. So we remember that Heritage in its first year, green algae was the most common, and we saw the plants getting bigger. And so it's exciting to see that at Irvington, cattails and willows are getting established even quicker than they had at Heritage. So some of the conclusions we can say from this is that the sites that are receiving effluent, they are restoring and recovering. And so I hope that we can keep putting water in the river. And the heritage site, as is being established, that it's continuing to grow in species richness and having a very diverse community. What's next? We'll be out this summer collecting more data at all 5 of these sites with 16 teachers, and we will see how the consistency of the flow at Irvington changes over time. Thank you, Michael, Jacqueline, teachers. We have a website, Santa Cruz River .arizona.edu or santacruz.arizona.edu through the university with a bunch of river events that a bunch of us host and also a bunch of educational information. There's my email. Questions?
All right, Kat, nice job. Yeah, and we're in good shape for questions too. So who's got them? Anybody on Zoom has been quiet. Anybody on Zoom? All right. No, that's all right.
Yeah, I just wondered if the salt cedars are removed.
Yes, we go in often and remove the smaller salt cedars pretty often, especially when we're out there in the summers. Anytime we see them, we're also out there just doing trash cleanups like pretty frequently. The bigger ones, about once or twice a year, we will go in there with like shovels and saws and try to remove them. But at some of the sites, especially farther north in Moreno, the trees are just so big, we like physically cannot remove them. One thing we also think about too is a lot of birds nest in them. We would obviously prefer the birds to nest, them to replace the salt cedars with willows, and the birds would still have somewhere to grow. But it's hard when there aren't adult willows. If we were just take out the salt cedar, where would the birds go? So just planning ahead, trying to slowly replace them instead of just like totally taking them all out.
Great, thank you.
Yeah, coming around.
Yeah, I'm going to follow up on the tamarisk question. So there's the perennial tamarisk, Athol, versus, which reproduces primarily vegetatively, and then there's all the other species of deciduous tamarisk. And so I'm wondering, have you seen any evidence for the vegetative reproduction or sexual reproduction, I guess, of the perennial tamarisk aphylla?
Do you know?
I can't speak to the exact method of reproduction that it uses, but it has shocked me because I tend to believe the old narrative that Athol is less invasive than the other species. But in the downtown reaches, Athol is the predominant species and it is recruiting fast. So I don't know how it's doing it or what it is, but that makes sense when you think of the legacy trees along the loop downtown. They're often giant Athol tamarisk, and so there's a very close source for them. But we haven't looked at all at like reproductive modes or how they're recruiting.
As we have a Zoom question, as I'm walking over there, the time lapse is the best. It tells the story so well. The water volume, or at least width, appears to change. And I'm trying to look at that, acknowledging that there are changes in aside from the storms, right? There are changes in the discharge coming out of Heritage, but also, do the plants play a role in how water moves and is placed in the riverbed?
Yeah, definitely. So one big thing too is like when there are more plant roots, obviously the plants are drinking the water, but as well the roots help hold water in the ground. So the groundwater is getting shallower, and so there is more water in the aquifer and in the groundwater, even if we don't see it up on the surface.
Okay, so we have a comment first from our friend Burrill. So they say that bulldozing is why we think the area between Ajo and 29th would be a better place for re-vegetation of the river due to it being wide and intended to be healing, which would not need to be bulldozed as it is designed to be natural. Any input on that comment?
About bulldozing and natural.
Okay, and then they also had a question. If you know what water releases are helping the groundwater rise in the West Branch area.
West Branch area? I'm not sure I know what they mean by West Branch. Okay, yeah, there's no water in the West Branch. Yeah, okay, that's what I was thinking of when we first started, when the comment first came up, was that there's a restoration site in the San Javier district of the Tohono O'odham Nation, the Wakickdan, which has been restoring surface flow, so that's a little bit farther south. And so that has helped. We also think that that's part of the reason that there are more larger plants, especially things like cattails and willows, able to be at the Irvington site faster than Heritage, because we believe some of the seeds are traveling from the Wakickdan there.
Excellent. Kat, great job. Thank you. All right, we're going to close out this block of presentations with Tony Figueroa from the Tucson Bird Alliance. And Tony's going to be talking about Santa Cruz stewardship as it pertains to invasive plant management. All yours, man.
Thank you. Well, hello, everybody. Always a joy to be here. And this is the 4th year in a row talking about invasive plants. So I'd like to try and change it up just a little bit. But first of all, Tucson Bird Alliance, if you haven't heard, we do a lot of invasive plant management. Most people just think of us as a birding organization, but we took the initiative back in 2020 to put some action to the words and actually protect the critical habitat that makes this place special. So we have an invasive plant crew, we have a restoration crew that are doing work to create habitat, to protect the habitat that all of our birds rely upon and all of their other species, but also that us primates really enjoy recreating through. So that's one of my goals. We're doing work all over the watershed here, from Sonoita, Patagonia, end of the watershed, to the Tumacácori section, right here in Tucson, up to Moreno, Catalina State Park. So up in the foothills is where we do a lot of our work, where buffalo grass and fountain grass is invading and starting to degrade the habitat that is where our saguaros are and where our majestic saguaros are on those bajadas. So all of this work hasn't gone unnoticed. The U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service just designated the city of Tucson as an urban bird treaty city. So we're only the 32nd city in this entire country to have this designation. So it's in a large part to all of the conservation efforts from people in this room. And what this is going to create is more funding opportunities for continued ecologically minded approaches to protecting our area down here. So exciting to have something like this come down from the federal level in this current era, but it happened on February 21st. We became the 32nd Urban Bird Treaty City, something to be proud of. This is a special place for birds. This is what the Tucson mountains at Saguaro National Park look like, and this is what our Sonoran Desert should look like. Nice, well-spaced landscape. If there was a lightning bolt to come down from the sky and strike one of these saguaros, it'd burn it out. It'd burn out a little patch of plants, but it's not going to spread through the landscape. This is the degraded state of a lot of our south-facing slopes in the foothills of the Santa Catalinas, the Tucson Mountains, and a lot of the Sky Island areas in the Sonoran Desert upland and moving out towards the Yuma direction. It's just a common thing. But people haven't been doing work on this as dedicated as we have in the last 10 years. Not just the Tucson Bird Alliance, but Pima County, National Park Service. A lot of people have been taking the action, but there's so many people that just think that nothing can be done. I'm here to inspire people that there is a way forward to managing a lot of these plants, because we don't want to see this happen. This is the Mercer Fire from 2019. It was a 25-acre patch of buffalo grass that had a lightning bolt land in it. It burnt the entire 25 acres of buffalo grass. You can see this if you are driving up Catalina Highway and you stop at the last stop sign before you go up the mountain at Snyder Road. If you look directly north, you're going to see a patch on the mountain that doesn't look like anything else, and it's the remnant of this. The saguaros are all dead or are dying in place. Palo Verdes are gone. If that nurse tree is gone, how long is it going to be for a saguaro to replace it? So our goal is to stop the invasion before we get to this phase. So everybody here, you can join the fight at stopping the Sonoran Getty from becoming a thing. Go out, do manual removal, go to buffalograss.org. That's a great place to find out where volunteer events are occurring in the region, or just take action around your neighborhood. Removing a few plants goes a long ways. But the work that we're doing is the huge, large scale, several acre size approach to managing plants. But in our parks, our natural areas, getting friends of groups, getting a friend just going out and doing this removal can do a lot to preserve the habitat that's right in our backyards. This is Case Natural Resources Park over on the east side. So this is the scale of the infestation that me and my team are handling. This is the north end of Campbell. It's the cobblestone unit of the Coronado National Forest. We started in 2022 spraying this area. And it takes a lot of really hard work. It is very challenging in this area. There were grasses that were up to our waist. You can actually see one of my coworkers here over here. This was the craziest thing I'd ever seen. And I had a hard time telling my crew, like, this is gonna pay off. But I did, I kept on telling them that, and we came back year after year to treat this site just during the monsoon season. And there's no silver bullet for any of this stuff. It takes that repeat treatments year after year. But in the first year, 8 people, we'd only cover half an acre. Now with 4 people, we can cover 10 acres in a single day, and just, it's quick little mop up of the few individuals that are growing in this area on a daily basis. The first time we were out there, didn't see any wildlife. We thought we were gonna be stepping on snakes, doing all sorts of crazy stuff because you couldn't see where you were stepping. And the year after and every year since, it's been a daily occurrence where it's a desert tortoise, it's a coach whip, it's a rattlesnake. We're built a little bit different. We really enjoy seeing rattlesnakes on a daily basis. But I mean, just look at this time progression. Horrible, still a fire concern, but all these plants are treated and just dying in place. Very little buffalo grass returning in 2023. 2024, there's a few plants, but our native perennial shrubs, they're still there, they're still growing. So it just shows that a mindful approach to what we're spraying can pay off. And my crews are trained and they just impress me so much. You'll see native cotton top grasses. These grasses that look very similar to anybody who doesn't know their grasses, but when you turn a corner after you've just sprayed 5 acres of buffalo grass, and you can be mindful enough to not spray this one little patch of native grass that's gonna continue to establish in this area, it's really heartwarming for me. So here's a striking before and after. This is just one big spray treatment every monsoon season, going out there, being mindful, taking care of the plants that are popping up. And my goodness, it is night and day difference. And this picture set has gone all up and down the National Forest Service because they are just ecstatic about this. And it's increasing the funding potential within the Santa Catalina Ranger District because of having these sort of photos to show them there's a reason why we're doing this work. And the brittle bushes are still there. The canyon ragweed, it's still there. The native grasses are coming back. It's a mindful approach. It's hard work, but it's well worth it. So this is just showing some of those close-up photos of plants that were sprayed. Desert lavender's still living. Brittle bush still living. You might have some collateral damage on an annual plant or another native grass, but you have to crack a couple eggs to make an omelet or to try and fix your omelet. But this approach isn't enough, and it also requires a lot of chemical to be put on the landscape. It takes a long time for these plants to break down, so there's still a fire hazard. So I'm a silly person, and I came up with a gimmick that isn't new, but the terminology simulated herbivory or simulated grazing is just the funny name that I came up with to try and inspire people to figure out a different way to manage buffalo grass and fountain grass. These plants are from Africa, buffalo grass specifically from Kenya, heavy grazing, heavy fire pressure. You light the plant on fire, grows right back. You graze it down to the ground, grows right back. So how can we use its life history traits to kill it? Looking at some of these big crazy spray areas, we were working with HOAs that would hire us to go spray the grass. We spray it, then they're like, well, I thought you guys were gonna remove the grass. Well, no, you told us to spray the grass. We sprayed it. So thinking, understanding people, wanting to see how we can make it a little bit more aesthetically pleasing while still driving our mission forward. If we graze it and have it respond to this grazing, we go out there, we become the grazers. Many of you have probably heard that mowing buffalo grass isn't sufficient. That's correct. It is not a sufficient treatment strategy. You need to approach it with a two-pronged approach. So graze it down and then follow it up with an herbicide application once it starts greening up. So we went out there. This is a project that is funded by the Department of Forestry and Fire Management, a grant that's held by the great folks at the Sonoran Institute, if y'all have heard of them, and then working in collaboration with Pima County Regional Flood Control to get match component for the work that they're already investing in the city to drive these projects forward and make them more valuable. So getting creative, go out there, cut the grasses down, and then just allow them to do their thing without any moisture. So we did a bunch of projects last year where we started these cuttings in April and May. If y'all were here last year, you remember it was a very dry year. That was part of what allowed us to be able to get out and get active cutting down these grasses because we weren't chasing stinknet. But without any rain, these plants will green up again. So then just going back out after you've cut them about 3 weeks to 6 weeks after the fact, you're gonna have green growing crowns, vibrant. And that is, glyphosate works best on actively growing plants. So if you spray a plant that's this big, only some of the tissue is gonna be absorbing it. But if you spray these little punks that are just like little pom-poms on the ground, it is a super effective spray strategy. So you've eliminated the fire risk by cutting down the biomass. You made the plant grow, opening up your ability to spray in different times of the year, and you've eliminated the plant and you see any of the seedlings that pop up. So it increases your efficiency dramatically. You're not creating soil disturbance by digging it out, which just tills the soil and lets that new generation recruit right behind it. So there's a lot of variables that makes this a really exciting opportunity. They die pretty quickly and they're a little bit more disconnected, so you don't have that fire risk of that standing biomass. So you can transform a landscape much more efficiently, much quicker with a lot less chemical use, but still hard work, still takes a lot of follow-up, and there's no silver bullet. You have to go back. The next time there's a big rain-up event, there's gonna be seeds in there that'll grow. I don't wanna get to that yet, but that's what we're doing. This is what we don't want to do. We don't want to become Maricopa County. This is Maricopa County. This is from the Aguila fire in 2000. This is what, or 2020. This is what it looked like in 2023. It has completely changed the landscape. It's had several fires that have wiped out most of our native shrubs, trees, and the saguaros aren't doing so well either. If you haven't heard of stinknet, here you go, sorry, but good to know about it. This is what stinknet looks like once it's dried out in Maricopa County. Spreads fire, produces a smoke that's acrid, corrosive to the lining of your lungs. The pollen from this plant is horrendous. So we created a website called stinknet.org to inform people about it, let people know about volunteer opportunities, but most importantly, to map and report it. This is what Maricopa looks like. This is what Tucson looks like. So most of these green dots mean that somebody saw it and removed it, saw it, treated it. There's some red dots out there. Some of them are false positives, but we're doing a lot in this city to stay ahead of this plan. It's not perfect, but it takes a community. Use stinknet.org. You go to the website, upper right corner, click the little 3 buttons to go to a map, zoom in on where your house is, see if there's any reports that are near your community or places you like to visit. and go join the club. Go pull a couple of plants, put it in a bag. It's all seeding right now, so if you go out and find it, please put it in a bag as soon as possible, but any action is better than no action. One of the final things that I'll talk about, the Storm to Shade program is a great program within the city of Tucson where they are capturing green stormwater. So slowing the downstream flood effects while capturing this water to create little natural oases right in our front yards, right off of the street. And we are one of the contractors for it. And even more exciting, we are now the herbicide trainer for all of the city of Tucson's herbicide applicators to teach them our best practices, our methodology, and see if we can improve all of the outcomes within the city, but then expanding to other areas. It's pretty exciting. We're just in the starting phases, but we're trying to lift all ships so that we can do a better job throughout the city. Final before and after picture, Colossal Cave Mountain Park. We started work here in 2021 with Pima County CLR. This is a year after our first spray where you see all of the plants have died for the most part, but there's some few plants in there. And this is what it looks like this year in February. So there's a few dead plants that you see that are small, but everything else has been a combination of manual removal and spray events that have occurred on an annual basis since 2021. We can make a difference if we work as a team. Thank you.
Nice job, Tony. Thank you. For the old heads here, if you want to report StinkNet, you go to StinkNet.
Yeah.
StinkNet.org. If you want to volunteer to pull bufflegrass, you go to bufflegrass.org. That's it. All right. We got a couple questions. I see folks. I got him first, then I'll come back to you.
Yeah, as someone who has unfortunately done invasive species treatment in the AmeriCorps program long ago, obviously it's a multi-pronged approach, as you mentioned, and you use multiple tools in a toolbox. Curious as to whether or not like USDA, ARS is doing any sort of research currently on biocontrol, whether it's insects or fungal pathogens to combat specifically these species. And if so, has there been any sort of promising research coming out of that that would suggest we could implement some biocontrol for these species?
I don't know of any biocontrols that have any traction at this moment, so I can't answer that. I know that there was somebody out of California that's presented at some conferences that's looking for funding for a biocontrol for stinknet specifically, but I haven't heard anybody talking biocontrols for bufflegrass or fountain grass.
Cool. First off, cool cactus wren shirt. Good bird. It's our state bird. And second of all, I'm wondering, your work, you use a lot of pesticides and stuff, and I'm wondering if the animals in the areas you're treating, because you do touch a lot of areas, if there are any adverse impacts to the surrounding animals, wildlife, and plant life and such.
Great question. And herbicides are what we use, and we use aquatic safe herbicides if we're ever working in an area where you're near water drainages. So like those GSI features, always using aquatic safe herbicides in those locations. In general, these plants are not used by any of our native creatures or animals. That's why they're not being kept in check. There was a conversation earlier about the salt cedar trees, and raptors will nest in the tops of them, but rarely do you see anybody using them because they don't produce seeds that are viable or consumable by them. It's like their ancestors never used it, so I'm not going to use that resource. It's not suitable for me. But the insects, most importantly, don't use those trees. They don't use those plants. So then birds and lizards aren't chasing after the insects in those locations. Is there collateral damage? Yes, if something lands right in front of somebody when you spray, that sucks, that's happened. I feel shitty when that happens, and I will use my own personal water to try and water them off in that time. But we know that they will have nowhere to go if we don't take the action to restore the land, to open it back up again. Like those buffalo grass fields, they're just completely unusable. Like, it was shading out any of the herps from being able to use those spaces. Nighthawks weren't able to use it to just nest on their little scratch of ground for a nest because they can't just fly out into the open. So if we do nothing, we're certainly going to lose those things. In my practice, I've seen very few insects or animals in areas that we're spraying.
Okay, so in a similar vein to previous questions, they were being asked, how about a genetic attack against the buffalo grass, as it is from Africa and should not have any plants here that would be affected by something developed just to attack buffalo grass? Is that something that's possible?
Sounds possible, sounds kind of scary too. Good luck to anybody who's doing that. I can tell everybody I won't be doing that research, so I won't find out that answer.
Dinosaur DNA. All right. Oh yeah, sure.
I drive by Sentinel Peak every day and get an up close look at it, and it's got a pretty bad buffalo grass problem. What are the challenges with, I guess I could just see that it's serving as like a highly visible, prominent example of before and after. I just foresee logistical challenges of doing it, as well as like maybe culturally sensitive challenges with herbicide treatment. Is that one you've considered attacking, and are those real challenges?
You're talking about bucket list items right there for me. I already hit Mount Lemmon Highway for the last 2 years, and that one looks great, but Tumamoc, like, I got dreams for that. And it is a patchwork of management and ownership of that area. But we've had a lot of talks about how we can approach that. And I think that the simulated herbivory approach mixed with true herbivory, if you've seen, there were grazing sheep on a mountain this year, but using some of those electric fence projects to have them graze that down and then spray it with crews, or using drones to spray some of the really cliffy areas. Those are some of the dreams that are being worked on and dreamt up by a lot of management, and hopefully we'll get there someday.
I have heard that in Mexico, they're still selling seed for buffalo grass by the sack. Can you address that at all? I don't have confirmation, but it certainly sounds concerning.
I've heard that also, and that's just unfortunately part of the life. That's the way that some people are able to make a living still, and it is truly sad how degraded some of those lands are in Sonora, and it's a challenge. So I'm not going to promise or be delusional to anybody that we're going to eradicate this from the entire Sonoran Desert, but we can protect the critical habitat, those riparian corridors, the saguaro forests, and then inspire people to do the same near them and protect their own personal saguaros, their houses. Like, we're trying to protect the saguaros that 15 different species of birds rely upon for their life cycle. But people are not realizing that their houses are at risk. These are the same grasses that fueled the Lahaina fires in Hawaii, the Malibu fires in California. They're gonna happen here, and it's one of the only things that's forcing some of the super rich people in the foothills to take action, is they're gonna lose their homeowners insurance. But we're doing this work to try and inform everybody and inspire everybody that there's a way to be proactive instead of just reactive and watch the world burn down around you.
Tony, if people have, if you spot bufflegrass or stinknet or something like that in your neighborhood, maybe in front of like a neighbor's house that you don't know particularly well and don't feel comfortable like ripping it out or blasting it, what's somebody to do?
If it's stinknet, just start pulling it. If it's bufflegrass, I would say, you know, try and make the recommendation to them, or I mean, me personally, I just remove it here and there until I can't. I remove what's reasonable. If I see onesies and twosies while I'm walking my dog, I'll bend down and pull those out. But if I see an entire lot, it's like, well, I'm not going to do anything about that one. But
311able, is there any like municipal tool that we have?
That's one of the things that we've been trying to work on with Tucson Clean and Beautiful and some of those reportings, because you can report them. You can report sightings more specifically along roadsides, and the roadside crews will follow up on it. But pointing it out in somebody's alleyway, they'll get a letter, but there's no real teeth in it. The county is working on a community wildfire protection plan, so hopefully there will be more guidance and support in that, but nothing really at the moment other than vigilante action. I've spent an hour in some random person's yard and nobody ever came out, nobody complained. Like,
look like
hey,
you're supposed to be there.
I'm removing the plant from your front yard. Like, that's how concerned I am about this. Like, oh, thanks.
All right, Tony, great job. Thank you so much for the work you do. We are going to turn it over now to Jacqueline Bruhn from the University of Arizona. And Jacqueline's going to be talking about implementing K through 12 field research experiences on the Santa Cruz River with Bioacoustic teachers. And this is going to be a very impactful program, and really looking forward to learning more about this. Jacqueline, it's yours.
All right, thank you, Luke, and thank you all for being here this afternoon for the last little bit of the day. So I'm Jacqueline Bruhn. I get to work with the last group of speakers that you heard from, Kat and Michael and Scully and Rocío. Thank you, Kat, for so I'm going to be talking about the Bioacoustic program, which you've heard a couple people talk about already. And how our teachers who are part of the Bioacoustic program implement field research with their students on the Santa Cruz River. So we'll start with what is Bioacoustic? So the acronym is Biological Research Experiences for Teachers. It is a National Science Foundation funded program. It started in 2022. And our final year is 2027, the final year of funding. So what is it? It is basically an immersive year-long research program for teachers. They start with a summer on the Santa Cruz River, about 6 weeks, also very intensive. During that summer, they spend about 2 weeks working with a graduate student mentor and doing a very specific research project. Throughout the project, we're really looking at the Santa Cruz River as our classroom, but also how to bring the Santa Cruz River back into students' classrooms and how to get students back to the river. We're looking at water very broadly, biodiversity, riparian habitat, place-based science, and then really zeroing in on building those research and data skills in our teachers, and then having that, again, go back to students. We're hoping to build this really enduring connection to the river with students, and then hoping that expands out to their families and their neighbors and their communities. And then finally, we're really working on teacher confidence to teach things that maybe they haven't spent a lot of time learning in their programs, right? So water issues, even just our very unique water cycle here in Tucson. Oh, there we go.
So this is our impact of the last 4 years. So we've had 10,000, nearly 10,000 students in classrooms to date, almost 3,000 students to the river. This is in large part to our partnership with Anacostia and the Conservation Lands and Resources crew, helping us get students to the river through the Living River of Words program. We've had 42 teachers trained. As Kat gave our preview, we have 16 teachers. We are very excited about joining the program. We've had teachers in 10 different school districts, and we'll be adding 2 more districts this summer, including as far down as Rio Rico, which we're super excited about. So where are we going to go? We're going to look at 2 student research case studies. We're going to look at birds. We've heard a lot about birds today. We're going to hear about them a little bit more, and some more turtles. And then I'll talk a little bit about what you might hear about next year. So we're going to start with bird biodiversity using technology. So Aaron Buckley, known as Buckley or Mr. Buckley, was in the Bioarts program in 24 through 25 school year. And as I mentioned earlier, teachers do about 2 weeks in a research group. His research group was the Wildlife Camera Research Group. And I think if you remember to Kat's map, and there are 5 locations. So this group puts wildlife cameras at 5 different locations, 2 cameras, 5 locations, and collects that data and looks at that. He is a 6th grade science teacher in Sunnyside School District. And as part of the program, we spend some time studying birds and how you would bring birds into the classroom. So birds are super accessible. You can attract them to campuses. You obviously see them at the river, and they're measurable. And there's a lot of student interest in being able to name birds. They like drawing birds. They like learning the bird calls. So Buckley has brought almost 200 students to the river over the last 2 years. He has very large classes. He did not bring 200 students on this trip, though, because that would be a little crazy. So what did this look like? So on campus, he started the research using cameras. So remember, he was in the wildlife camera group, brought that back, using that with bird feeders, and then starting to think about using Merlin. So Merlin, if you're not aware, is an amazing app that you will listen for the birds wherever you are, and then will tell you what birds you're hearing. If you don't have Merlin, I recommend downloading it. So it makes it really accessible for people that don't know the birds, especially middle school students or high school students. So this is how they started. They started with the cameras and the bird feeders on campus. This is some of their data they collected. And then the students really, because they've been to the river with Living River of Words, wanted to understand the relationship between birds and the river. And so to get prepared for running Merlin at the river, they needed to learn how to use Merlin. Buckley created a game called Guess That Bird, where they were doing both learning bird calls and learning to ID birds. He created a limited study guide, because a field guide is pretty intimidating, so that the students, when they were at the river running Merlin, they wouldn't just be looking at their phones, they would be scanning for birds. So where do we do this? Not a fancy map. We've seen some very fancy maps today, but we were just north of Danny Lopez Park, officially Danny Lopez baseball fields. And then again, the students, they've got their bird data from their campus, and then they wanted to find out some bird data from the river. So we collected data at 3 spots. So right near the built environment, in the sort of desert area off of the loop trail, and then up and down that 3rd X along the river. So this is what it actually looks like to be in the field with a group of 25 to 30 students collecting data. This was our procedure. So really the bulk of it was spent it was moving around, but also those 9 minutes, those 9 quiet minutes. We were in groups, about 5 or 6 kids to 1 adult who was running Merlin. They would collect the data on their data sheets. And then here you see Michael as the head data wrangler, which he is excellent at. And all of the students we would report out to this main larger data sheet. So first by the ball fields and then down by the river. So then we are in the river. We did spread out a little bit just to spread out, to be a little quieter. There was a lot of us. When you're listening for birds, you want to try to have less disturbance. And the students were really, really focused and excited and interested in doing this. So this is what the data sheet looks like at the end. So we use different colors. The letters correspond to the different groups. Remember I said there was 5 or 6 kids per adult running Merlin. And this helps students in the field start to talk about the data they've just collected. What patterns do you see? And here's Michael right by the ball fields. The bleachers make a great outdoor classroom setting to really see some patterns in the data, ask some questions. We did a very quick a little data visualization because for some kids, this is going to be harder. So remember, these are 6th graders. So they're learning a lot of these concepts right now in the class, things like averages. And so this was an amazing trip. We have continued to do these trips. This was the first one. Buckley is also working on a lesson plan that will be on our website that will describe everything he did and everything we did at the river. So now we are going to explore turtle ecology. So this trip was with Kathleen Barrett, Miss Kate or Kate. She was in the same group as same year, Buckley 24-25, she was in the turtle research group. So completely different research during that 2-week intensive period. And she was with Connor Hanley, and Connor was her grad mentor in that group. And he's gonna come up a couple times. So she really wanted to create a 4-day research experience for her students. Kind of like a mini Biorets, right? So she had this incredible experience and she wanted her students to have that experience. This took place crossroads at Silver Bell Park, where the Living River Words program is also. So one of the things that's special about Kate and special about this particular research trip is she teaches middle school deaf and hard of hearing students. She was a teacher at the Arizona School for the Deaf and Blind. She really wanted to have her students have an experience that they had never had before. Having deaf students who communicate primarily with sign language definitely was something that we had to work in to the plan. What it meant was the pace had to be really different. So here you see these 2 students having this conversation. And if a student looks away from when instructions are being given, they will have no idea what's going on. So we just really had to make sure that everyone was pretty focused. And again, these are 6th, 7th, and 8th graders. The other challenge that Kate faced in creating this field trip and us helping her implement it is a lot of these students haven't had a lot of science. It hasn't been part of their education, and their language skills are lower than where they should be as a 6th, 7th, or 8th grader. So a lot of things to take into account in creating this experience. So our preparation again, Living River of Words, amazing field trip actually that was with not just the deaf and hard of hearing middle schoolers, but the high schoolers and the blind and visually impaired middle and high schoolers. So amazing day at the river where the students really got to spend some time, see the river, see the place where we're going to be getting doing the turtle research, start working on vocabulary, start thinking about what is it like to be at the river, start learning really new things. Back in the classroom, Kate got a turtle trap and had that in the classroom for a couple months. And then there's a turtle video, which everyone can watch, that's linked on from our website to our YouTube channel, that they watched a lot to learn about the turtles. So again, what does it look like to take 20 deaf and hard of hearing students to the river? So again, you see Connor here working with the students. So really, again, Kate's goal was the students as researchers, right? So they have ownership. They're both taking the measurements, obviously with guidance from Michael and Connor. Here they're looking at substrate, right? This is hands-on science. They are in the river doing it. You'll see some more pictures, setting and checking the traps. And then obviously our goal is for them to relate these habitat measurements with the turtle results, right? Did their hypotheses hold? So here's Michael and two students setting a trap, like super, hopefully being somewhat helpful. And then this is what the data for when we set the traps looked like. So the students chose these variables, and so the students are recording all of this at the same time, but we always have another set of data that the teacher can take back with them. So it was 4 days. It started on a Friday. Again, lots of data collection. Day 2 and 3 were actually really special and kind of unplanned days. So again, Connor is here. So at Arizona School for the Deaf and Blind, students board on the weekends. It's mostly Native American students. Connor is Pasquayaki. And for these students to meet, they're actually looking at a catfish because there were no turtles that day. But for them to meet a scientist who is also Native American was an incredibly powerful outcome, and not one that we had necessarily planned for, because Kate wasn't sure what students would be available over the weekend. So then the 4th day, we go back to check the traps. I love these 2 photos because it really is what we're hoping is going to happen with biorets. So teachers are going to be in the field with us. They're going to be learning new techniques, new skills. Here's Kate with Connor and Michael learning to measure a spiny soft shell. And here we did have turtles in the traps. Kate is with her student and teaching her student to do the same thing. So the final day, that Monday, was very exciting. You can see all of the faces and a lot of conversations about the turtles. And, you know, in particular, I want you to look at the girl here with the sort of pinkish sweatshirt on, who's really giving that spiny soft shell kind of a side eye. But there she is, like she got in there. You see another student who is working on measuring a turtle. I'm not quite sure why the tape measure is out quite so far. And then here we have Kate teaching the students how to release the turtles after we have taken all of the turtle data. And, you know, again, sort of just showing visually with her hands what to do. And then here's our final group picture. Really just an incredible experience for all of us and also for Kate. Kate went back with her data to the classroom and continued to do some data visualizations and really work with that data set with her kiddos. So what's next? So we are currently, we have a new research trip that we're working on with Mrs. Shepard. She is a middle school teacher, Flowing Wells Middle School, and she is looking at Santa Cruz River water quality. We've done a couple trips identifying macroinvertebrates with her students. And here's just a little preview of them after working really hard for 2 hours jumping in the river at Upper Valley Road. The website that I think it was on Michael's slides, it was on Kat's slides, santacruz.arizona.edu, events, lessons, research. Buckley and Mrs. Shepard have an article about data science with students that is listed on our website, and many, 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 many lessons. And we couldn't do all of this work without all of these amazing partners who come every summer and meet our teachers. And I know many of you have probably gotten emails from Michael for that amazing group of 16 that are going to be starting in like a month and a half. But thank you all for everything you do to support us and our teachers.
That's Jacqueline, thank you. All right. We can find time for a question. Anybody have a question in the room? Is any of this opt-in for educators? Is any of this like an opt-in for educators?
Depends on
Yet-
how you
yet?
define opt-in. So teachers in the Biorights program, they have to apply. And so the 16 teachers that are starting this summer, they applied in the late, like January, December, January, and then went through a process. So we do have funding for one more year. And so on that website, santacruz.arizona.edu is where we list where we list when the application comes available. So it'd probably be around the same time next year.
Thank you so much for this presentation and this incredible work. Thank you. All right, now we can welcome up Catherine Bartlett from the Arizona-Sonora Desert Museum. Catherine's going to be talking about the Spadefoot Splash, building a culture of water stewardship through nature play. Catherine, oh, there you are. Well, freehand plugged in?
Freehand.
You got it.
I gotta move.
So you can advance it.
Awesome. All right. Hi, everybody. Thank you so much for having me. I've been a very long time fan, first time presenter at this conference, so I'm excited to be here. Thank you. My name's Catherine Bartlett. I'm the Associate Director of Education at the Arizona-Sonora Desert Museum. Raise your hand if you've heard of the Desert Museum. This is a well-informed crowd, so I will not go into the history of the museum, but it's a special place. I run the education department, and then under my purview is basically all field trips, family programs, summer camps. If somebody comes to the museum or we go off-site for anyone under 18, those are the programs that I run. On top of that, though, I'm also the lead interpreter for all new exhibits that we put out, so all new storylines, and I do a lot of the SciComm for the Desert Museum. So I'm going to talk about our brand new exhibit that just opened this semester. This is called Spadefoot Splash, and this is cultivating water stewardship through nature play. And this is for our littlest learners. So I'm going to walk you through the process of how we got to this exhibit. So we did a lot of research and development going back 2 to 3 years at least. Many people in this room or your organizations were involved in some of that research. So I did surveying, member surveying, I did listening sessions, we did Zoom sessions, I did tours. We took some of our exhibits teams to different places around Tucson. Many people welcomed us, which is great. I was very happy to hear about the Platicas yesterday because I was like, ooh, I had some good thoughts in there because that's where it was. But I have a lot to learn too about how to get some of that community feedback. So that was a really great connection. And then after that, I did some pop-ups at the museum, some A/B testing. We had some prototypes. We asked kids, what would you want to do? What would you be attracted to? We had talked to a lot of caretakers as well. And so all of this became data that I started working with. So this is what it ended up being. From all of those listening sessions, the exhibit goal really distilled down to one message, and that message is water is life. And I heard that over and over and over from every single organization that I talked to. So we anchored to the idea that when you walk away from this exhibit, your learning goal was water is life, okay? However, there's also support concepts under there. So we had support concept 1 is culture, water connects us. Support concept 2, save water, water is scarce. Support concept 3 is biodiversity. So where there is water, there are plants, animals, and people. Support concept 4 is nature play, water is fun. And support concept 5 is science, art, and language are intertwined. So all of these things should be represented in the exhibit somewhere. So why does this matter? We are connecting young children with nature in an age-appropriate setting. We are supporting learning through play, art, and movement. We are strengthening our family engagement and encouraging longer stays. So I know a lot of people say they come to the Desert Museum when there's family in town, or they're like when they're being tourists or something. But for the past 10 years, the museum's really been concentrating on capturing our family audiences of Tucson. So we opened Vulture Culture, then Stingray's Touch, then Pack Rat Playhouse, and all of that with the very real intention that somebody is taking their family there for a family day. So this is where it strengthens that like family engagement. And then we're expanding our interpretation of riparian areas, and we are adding accessible shady features. All right, so this is our overview of our streamside play for our littlest learners. This is outdoor nature play. It has a toddler nature loop trail. We have a conservation station. So does anybody remember our old like ice cream shop that we used to have? Well, that got gutted and we renovated it into a conservation station, which I'll show you in a second. We expanded the otter exhibit, and it also incorporates art, mindful moments, and a pond. So if you recall, when you're walking around the Desert Museum, does anyone go over like the frog bridge? We call it the frog bridge. It has all the little frogs on it. Yeah, I'm seeing some nods, good. Just north of that frog bridge, we now have a pond. And so that is something that I'm gonna do photofauna on, and I wanna talk to the acoustic people as well. All right, so for the infrastructure and amenities, namely, like when people come here with their families, they just have to be comfortable. So this is a big shady spot. We had 3 family restrooms added. There's a comfortable patio, there's movable seating, and this is stream water that was already going to be used. So it was used for irrigation, but we decided to use it a second time. So we used it first for play, and that same water is now used for irrigation. All right, streamside play. So this is what it looks like. We just opened in March. We have a creek. It is on a timer, so every 20 minutes we have some water flow coming down, and people are welcome to take their shoes and socks off, immerse themselves, completely immerse themselves. If you want to lay down, have at it. Enjoy water, what makes you feel good. We have rocks, we have sticks, so kids can become their own engineers and feel what it looks like to make that water move themselves. We have a lot of play. We have embedded into the rock work, we have scats and tracks. So there's a storyline that you can actually read once you learn what those tracks look like. And then we have these stampers that have tracks, so then you can make the stamps and storyline yourself. And there's also a bit of a beach area. Okay, so then from the streamside play, you can cross that and you go into the nature trail. Again, nature trail could be a little generous, but we're talking toddlers, okay, toddlers, so small nature trail. And we have some pullouts on that nature trail for activities. So the first one we have is a spinner. So this spinner has 4 levels to it, and it's 5-sided. So as you spin, you can create a creature. So the 4 sides are, we have a fish, a turtle, a dragonfly, and a pupfish. Did I say pupfish? No, okay. So we have those 4 creatures that represent what you would see in our conservation station. The 5th side is a mirror. So we are inspiring empathy for those animals by seeing themselves in them. So you could put your head on one, or your thorax or abdomen or whatever. But if you know about development ages, mirror play is really important at that age. So toddlers really like to look in the mirror and see themselves, and they're learning through this action. We also have some appropriate sized movement, and then we also have a nature sit spot too. Oh, and we also acquired 5 glass and flight dragonflies that are peppered throughout the exhibit for art. Okay, this was really cool. We have 2 brand new murals on the conservation station in Spadefoot Splash. One is anchoring to the idea that water is life, and the other anchors to the idea that water is fun. And sorry, I'm just so excited. I'm really excited about this. So Dwayne Manuel was the lead artist. He is a professor of fine arts at Tohono O'odham Community College. And Seneca and Derek are his students, his apprentices. So they worked on all of these together. We also have music incorporated. And this is water play. So I don't know if anyone's heard of a Buddha board before, but it's where you paint with water and then it evaporates. So we're anchoring back to that idea of the ephemeral nature of water. Okay, biodiversity. So we are representing biodiversity and community science within this exhibit. We have new signage up inspiring people to join our eBird and our INAP projects. Again, I'm really excited about that pond that we're putting in. And we also have within our conservation station, which was that used to be that ice cream hut that I told you about. So now we have the herpetology ichthyology team has their breeding projects on display for the first time. We've never had that at the museum, so we're bringing that to the forefront. We have the Mexican garter snake, Sonoida mud turtle, Huachuca water umbel, and pupfish. You can see the keepers working behind the scenes, and they're able to switch out those projects as things come available. All right, and then for water conservation, on the buildings, we have 4 cisterns, and on the outside of that building, we also are teaching people what to do with berms, and we're planting it as though it could be a Tucson backyard. And then last year, this is one of my favorite connections. Our Kawadi Kids Club does an annual Earth Day poetry contest. And our winner did not know that Water is Life or anything about this exhibit was even being built. They were inspired to write this poem, and I'll give you just a minute to read it. It's a pretty touching poem. And when we saw it, we knew immediately that we wanted to put it in the exhibit. It's also translated into Spanish. Aurelia visited us on opening day, and she's so proud to have her work there represented on a permanent space. Okay, and one more area that we have represented is the actual story of the Santa Cruz. And as we've learned over the last 2 days, there are many, many, many different angles and different stories of the Santa Cruz. But we partnered with Dr. Giselle Ramon Sabron. She co-authored this part of the signage. This is a taste of what's to come. And if you have ever worked in SciComm, social media, blogging, exhibitry, signage, anything like that, you're taking something that is really a large story, and you have to learn how to distill it down in an accessible way. And when we work in signage, we're working with 150 words. And can we take somebody's dissertation and make it 150 words? No, but Giselle's also, she also in her own right and in her own job, she works in this arena as well. So this was a really beautiful matchup. This is not the whole signage, but it's the intent that it is bi-trilingual, not in a way that we have typically done in the past at the museum where we have an English sign and then we have a Spanish sign, but this is more infusion of the language throughout. Okay, that was a really quick and dirty way, but this is where we are really concentrating on our littlest learners, because where do you get conservationists that are all of our age? You start them young, fall in love with the desert, fall in love with these creatures, understand how precious water is, see them grow up, and that's what we're doing at the Desert Museum. So I'm happy to take questions.
Great, loved it, thank you. Who's been to this? Anybody? Anybody check this out yet? All right, good. All right, I can't wait to go. To get my nieces and nephews to visit. All right,
I did say that it was for toddlers and 0 to 5-year-olds, but we have seen campers there, we've seen middle schoolers there, we've seen adults there. It's for everybody, I promise. Everybody loves to play with water.
Okay. Hi. So we have one question from Zoom. They ask, are you still doing Desert Arc to elementary schools?
Oh, yes, absolutely. So Desert Arc is our outreach program. It's an extremely robust program. We're running outreach all of the time. It is winding down to the end of the school year, but you can start booking for the fall.
Can you describe that program just a little bit more?
Through the Desert Museum, we do outreach into schools. So you can go on our website, desertmuseum.org. You can book us to come to everywhere, festivals, classrooms. I have tabled with many, many of you at many of these events.
Excellent. Any more questions? Catherine, thank you so much for this and for your work. Well, we've come to it. We are at the final presentation for this year's Santa Cruz River Research Days. This is one that I'm very excited for all of these. I've seen and heard this last one, and I'm really excited to be able to share this with you all. I'm going to invite up Sarah Fraker, Jackie Glazer, and Kay He from the University of Arizona to talk a bit about Sonoran Rivers, a celebration of desert water. Come on up.
Hi, everyone. We just have just a few words to tell you about this project before we show it to you. So all three of us are on faculty at the U of A School of Music, and we spent the last year working on a project. The piece we'll be sharing with you today, Sonoran Rivers, is one of the musical works created during a year-long agenda, of arts events and community collaborations exploring watershed ecology and stewardship. We were funded through the AIR Annual Resilience Theme Award at the U of A, with additional funding from two organizations that I want to mention. The one was the Santa Cruz Valley National Heritage Area and also the French National Center for Scientific Research. And we made this piece in collaboration with many community organizations, including the Cienega Watershed Partnership, Watershed Management Group. We worked with Lauren here. The San Javier Department of Natural Resources at the Tono O'odham Nation. Giselle, mentioned in the last presentation, was one of our project advisors, and the Tucson Symphony Orchestra. I've been a member of the orchestra for the last 20 years. This is our city's professional orchestra, and so they are featured in this video that you're going to see. The performance captured in this live recording was filmed during our 2025 Young People's Concerts. We play those downtown, attended by 8,000 students over 3 days last May. But in all, last spring, about 19,000 Tucsonans heard this piece, Sonoran Rivers, during live concerts throughout the watershed. And over 900 musicians played this piece. And my colleague Jackie is going to tell you about that aspect of the project.
Hi, I'm Jackie Glazer. I'm the clarinet professor at the U of A, is usually my instrument. As part of this project, we gathered a consortium of ensembles. And so we reached out to a lot of local community organizations, orchestras like the Southern Arizona Symphony Orchestra. We reached out to a bunch of high school bands, and we had about 18 ensembles in our consortium that agreed to perform the piece, which is amazing because when they agreed, the piece hadn't been written yet. So over the year, we worked together. Allison Hawthorne Deming wrote the narration for the piece, and then Kay, she's going to talk about the composition, but she wrote the music for it. We workshopped it with ensembles at the U of A. We had a professional version that was performed by the TSO, which you're going to hear soon. And then we had a student version that was performed by the student ensembles. We also went into the schools. We provided curriculum, we provided videos for the students to understand the science of what they were working on the piece, but also the interdisciplinary connections of where the music is representing the science. And Kay will probably talk about that more. But as my colleague said, we reached over 19,000 people in a bunch of performances from February through May. So it was really exciting to hear all the different ensembles performing the piece. And I'll introduce Kay to talk about her piece.
Hi, everyone. My name is Yuanyuan Kei He. I am an associate professor at the University of Arizona, and I'm also the composer for this work, Sonoran Rivers. For me, Sonoran Rivers is a musical journey through the history and challenges of our local watersheds. By combining music and the ecological data and also scientific storytelling, I aim to create a space where music and sound can truly reflect both of the complexity and also the beauty of these desert rivers. And also, you know, their changing conditions nowadays that is quite alarming. I wanted to mention one part of the composition. I actually be able to use some of the scientific data was shared with me, and I did a lot of research, and personally, I'm not really a scientist, so looking at numbers and graphs can be a little bit challenging for me, but I spent a lot of time and going to field trips with all of, you know, our amazing scientists on the groups, and to really understand the knowledge behind it and be able to use music to reflect that and also transform that in a way. As we have been talking about water as in, you know, related to life. So to me, I think water is a powerful symbol for life and also resilience. Through this piece, I hope to inspire a deeper connection to our land and water, and also to bring our communities together in caring for and protect something that we truly love. So I hope you enjoy Sonoran Rivers. Thank you.
Why don't we use this time to chat a little bit if there are questions about the data collection, can we sort of extrapolate a little bit more on that? So what sort of field recordings were used to inspire and inform this piece? Can you talk a little bit about that?
So yeah, sorry about the technical difficulty. Every time that I work in multimedia, so a lot of times we had to dealing with debugging. So that's kind of like our daily life. Thank you for bearing with us. So I wanted to talk a little bit about my experience of working with scientists, and also, of course, you know, my amazing colleagues here, artists. It's a really eye-opening experience for me, because when they first approached me, say, hey, Kay, do you want to write a piece for a watershed? I was like, what? And I started to learn what is watershed, why is it important, why we should want to protect it. Right? Why is it affecting our life? Because a lot of times when we're thinking about scarcity of waters, we don't actually understand it. We're just knowing that we're being educated. That's not something very attractive. So how can we make this collaboration to be something that is really impactful and different than just being educated? So first of all, as a composer, I have to learn, I have to feel the connection with the watershed, which I had zero idea about before the project. So I started going to, you know, meetings, and then we were literally sitting down and analyze the graph And that was still very abstract to me. And then we started scheduling like, field trips, actually going into the field and then, working with scientists to talking about what is actually going on, what we see as native or as invasive, what is good, what is wrong. So that's the part that really kind of struck me to thinking about, oh, I had no idea about the land and, the environment that I'm living in. And in the end of the project, I start to really focusing on composing the piece is I really have the sense of I'm so empowered to tell the story because I know the story and the science behind it. How can I use music to actually reflecting that? So I hope I did a good job. So we'll see. Let me know that how you guys feel after listening. Yes.
Great. And I think we're debugged.
Okay.
Grab that.
The desert. The Santa Cruz River is a desert dweller, a desert traveler, gathering drop by drop, seep by seep, runnel by runnel. Water drains out of mountains and collects into a streambed. Streambed by streambed, water merges into a creek. Creek by creek, water becomes a river. Water reshapes itself, traveling through the land, snaking its way forward, shaping the terrain. Water sings as it travels, riffle, laughter, gurgle, swoosh. Its music gentles the air until monsoon rain makes it roar, ripping out brush, snapping trees, sending them crashing downstream. Then the river stills to an almost imperceptible hum, and then it vanishes. Las Ciénagas, the marshes. The road from Tucson to Sonora leaves city sprawl and desert scrub behind, climbs into rolling hills of oak and pinyon, then slopes down to sweeping golden grasslands dotted with mesquites. A seam of bright green cottonwoods marks a living course of water, the lush riparian corridor of Ciénaga Creek. Water in the desert is an invitation to life. A community of creatures visits the flowing creek, coyote, bobcat, pronghorn, antelope, guadamundi, and 100 species of migrating birds. Endangered wetland species inhabit the waters, Gila top minnow, Gila chub, and the snoring Chiricahua leopard frog. 12,000 years, indigenous people have lived and hunted along the Santa Cruz River. Between 200 BCE and 1450 AD, the Hohokam settled there in villages. Skilled water engineers, they built canals, channeling water from river to their crops. They built terraces and rock dams to capture rainwater. The Hohokam communally grew tepary beans, yellow melon, squash, and corn. Their knowledge of the desert made them agile, dryland farmers. The Ogden people believed these were their ancestors. The Ogden's traditional knowledge of the land and water reaches deep in time. Their calendar reflects this learned relationship with place. May is mesquite bean harvest moon, June, saguaro fruit ripening moon, July, big rains moon, August, short planting moon, September, dry grass moon. The Waka community at San Javier has restored a section of the river as a shady refuge, the Hinktown, where land and water are held sacred. Water means resilience of the land for the Otham. Resilience of the land and growing traditional crops means resilience of the culture. but agriculture, mining, and development have taken their toll. The water table dropped from 25 feet below the surface to 300 feet, deeper than the roots of cottonwoods or mesquites can reach. The city of Tucson grew up on the banks of the Santa Cruz River. Here, roughly 1 million people use 100 million gallons of water each day. Today, the river's path through the city is mostly a bone-dry tract of sand with patches of scrub. When the monsoons hit, the rivers roar for a few days, washing whatever is in its path downstream. Sediment, brush, shopping carts, big gulp cups, lost sneakers. At Tanqueray Creek, where people have made efforts to restore the land, the aquifer has been steadily recovering, and seasonal flows have returned. On spring days, the creek runs crystal clear, and willows lean out over the flow. A blizzard of fluffy cottonwood seeds drifts on the breeze. Birdsong trickles down with the dappled sunlight under cottonwood leaves. But mostly, the urban rivers look like the afterthought of rivers. The music of the future. The music of the future is a music of uncertainty. What work will we do to protect what we love? We have good tools and rich traditions to draw upon. The technologies for water conservation and habitat restoration. There is so much good work to be done. Some say frogs were the first singers on earth. Some say it was water that gave the earth the gift of melody. What will be the music of the future?
Wow, thank you. That was beautiful. It sounds beautiful always. The presentation is incredible here. What a talent to have here with us. Do folks have any questions? Inspirations, process, access to recordings, things like that? All of the above? Yeah, so how can folks see or hear this again in the future?
So the TSO, the Tucson Symphony Orchestra, just published it to their YouTube page, so we can probably send a link out to y'all. But if you just go on the TSO YouTube channel, you'll be able to find it.
Lee, oh, come on, of course. Yeah, I got it.
You may not know the answer to this if you weren't involved in the cinematography, but I was kind of surprised in the section of the composition that described the city, like the urban river, that there, at least I don't recall seeing any shots of the actual riverbed within the city. I mean, there were plenty of shots of the dry riverbed, but they were not in an urban area. And so I thought that, well, that's curious. And I wondered if maybe that's because there was just like too much trash, or if it wouldn't be photogenic, or I don't know.
Right. I was actually thinking about to, get some of those footage by myself, but I just thinking about we wanted that live as in our mind rather than being putting in a piece of music as a, that's at least for me. I wanted all of us here to see the beauty rather than the street trash. So yeah.
And I just want to compliment Kay because in addition to writing the music, she edited the video. So she did hours of footage, and we didn't actually initially intend to have photos and the drone footage, but as we were editing it, we're like, no, we need the images. So that was provided to us by Alan Nayeri and some students as well. And I think there's a couple things that maybe Sarah and Kay took on their iPhones that we used, but we didn't actually intend for that visual part to go at the beginning.
And I also wanted to mention when you see the brush with the flood, that actually in my backyard. So I was like, we need this flooding photo with, shopping carts and stuff, but I couldn't find any shopping cart. I was like searching for that. But I think I got something captured pretty realistically. That was over monsoon. So last year, yeah.
Yeah, and this was meant to be just like one artifact of our project, as we didn't have the resources to gather all the accurate. I mean, I'm sure everyone in this room could have contributed like hundreds of images for this project, but really our efforts were in the live production of the season and the musicians actually making the music live on stage and the students involved in their band classrooms, learning the music, and Kay working with them and talking with them about the music. So we know that the visuals don't always, represent everything, but we tried.
Yeah, so I would like to say that probably opening doors for everybody here. If we are about to do another collaboration, we would like everybody to contribute if you would like, yes.
There we go. That sounds wonderful. We are so fortunate to have this experience, this visual, this audio. Thank you for your talents and for bringing those and sharing those with us today. Thank you. And with that, we conclude Santa Cruz River Research Days for 2026. Again, wait, do we have out slides? Okay. Well, I don't have to do facilities. We got those covered. We had 28 presentations. We had about 150 people either present in the room or tuning in. And Nobody gave more than one presentation. However, our friends at the Tucson Language Justice Collective gave 28 presentations and all of my nonsense. Thank you tremendously. It completely changes this event and it makes it so much more impactful and important. So thank you both for your talents. We want to thank our steering committee. Again, this was the Santa Cruz River program from Sonoran Institute, Ben Lomeli, Tony Palmer from Tumacácori National Historical Park, and Professor Michael Bogan for work behind the scenes to make this event a reality. I should go through the slides before I start ad-libbing. Our funders, including the Water Infrastructure Finance Authority of Arizona, Tucson Electric Power, and Cox Communications, as well as support from Friends of the Santa Cruz River, Pima County Regional Flood Control District, and Tucson Water. Special extra thanks to Claire Zugmeyer. Claire just does tremendous work to make this event a reality. Keep it going, keep it going, keep it going. We had Elle Andrews back there working the Zoom, Kasha Eiler and Bianca Chavez working this whole time. It really takes, and Kim Ajita just left as well. Thank you, Kim. And to all of you for sticking around. Show of hands, who was here for both days? Thank you all. Thank you everybody for being here. To be here for 2 days is humongous. For the two-handers, can you put them back up? Who's coming on the field trip tomorrow? All right, okay. Still good. Thank you. It's a lot. It's a big commitment to do 3 days with us. Come on. Thank you for your participation. Please grab any snacks. We have hats. We have Living River reports. We've got stickers. We've got T-shirts. Okay, so for doing the long haul, please make sure you all grab something from our merch. And please keep in touch with Sonoran Institute. We have events going on all through the year. Our next big thing in town, I think, is our Dragonfly Festival, which is the whole month of September. We'll be doing tours of the river, virtual tours, events at restaurants, events at clubs. It's a blast. So keep in touch with us. We hope to keep in touch with you. And thank you, thank you, thank you for being a part of this in Zoom world and here in the room. Have a great afternoon, everybody.